Oh no, did I fuck up chat? I was actually just like, what the fuck is wrong with chat? What the fucking wrong is fuck with chat? What the fucking wrong is with chat? This is when stream browser source breaks. Because Jake was clicking the wrong button to start the stream. Ah! You weren't supposed to see me yet. I gotta fix the chat. I actually fucked everything up before this stream. Oh, I found it. And there we go. Wait. Yes. I think that's caught up. Alright, now we send out the ping. All right, before we get started here, I got something I need to bring up. Straws are over. I am never drinking from a straw again on stream. This shit is fucked up. I look like a goddamn gerbil. I look like a gerbil drinking out of its little water thing. You guys put the straw in between the bars of the cage. This is AI. This one is just AI. I don't even think that's real. I genuinely don't, because why is this one so soft and fuzzy? This one's in like ultra 4K. I look like a fucking ghoul. I look like I'm from Fallout New Vegas. I look like I'm a zombie. Why am I giving it the greatest suck of its life? I almost pulled the damn soul out of that straw. I'm never using a straw again on stream. It's just the way that it is. Fellas, is it gay to use a straw? I'm starting to think yes, it might be. I don't know why I hollowed out my cheeks like that. Maybe you've just never really given it the type of suction that it needed before. Maybe you've never been thirsty like me before. Because I need fuel. I need to support my talking. You've just never burned energy like a man like me. I'm drinking from straws that you could never suck. You guys have never applied suction to a straw like I have. Never again. I'm taking the fucking... Look. We're getting rid of this shit today. That was like way louder than it needed to be. I'm really worried I'm gonna knock this over now, so I need to put it somewhere else, so... One hand. I'm one hand drinking. I'm sitting up straight, actually. I almost just did it again. I'm one hand drinking now. Delicious. Really wobbly, actually. I'm definitely gonna fucking somehow knock that shit over. It's too tall. It's just like the moment arm of force from hitting on the top. It's just too much. Welcome everybody to the Jake Don't Draw live stream super show extravaganza experience. A little bit of a stutter there. Probably could have thrown in a few more too. How's everyone doing today? I've seen a lot of names in chat. I woke up a little bit of a sore throat this morning, so I'm going to be sipping on some tea. It's nut tea. It's my nut tea. Very delicious. What's up, Oksana and Oliver, and Kripsoff and Dylan and Jason and Emily and Jason and Sika and Glass, and I saw Jal and Money and David and Gray and Gaia and Jane and Mia and Kay. Jake, you should try painting a 3D model by hand. I actually really do want to do that. That is a video idea I've written down before. I just have to center myself. The problem is I get really bored of doing the same thing over and over. Like, I can normally do something for like a month or two max. And so then I try to do something, like I just want to like learn a bunch of skills. Then I go and I try to do something like way over here, but then I'm always jumping around between shit, and like it's not good for like making a career of content. So I'm trying to measure myself a little bit. Got another, actually that flows well into this. I have 2 videos coming out in April, 2 YouTube videos, full-length YouTube videos, my chat friends. We are going to be doing April 7th. The internet is obsessed with fake color theory. That will be a very fun video. Gonna kind of shit on some of the, never use black type advice that gets thrown out there. Never use black, always mix your own. Someone told me, like, you can never mix white into a shadow or something. We're talking about gamuts, color gamuts, palettes, pigments, all sorts of that shit. It's going to be just like the last one. Exactly the same format as the last one. I will probably do a little color mixing on video, though, just to explain some concepts. And probably show my color visualizer. So maybe it's not going to be that much like that one, but, basically the same. I'm going to write a script and do a bunch of research and look into the history of color theory and stuff like that and try to figure out where the origin of some of these myths and stuff started from. Look at TikToks and stuff. So that'll be fun. At the end of the month, I just set up a nice video idea. It's gonna be a video about drawing, a little bit about design, about like character design and stuff. I got a friend that's gonna call in for that one, so that's gonna be exciting. Very end of the month. So that's what we got planned for this upcoming month. Also, Blackmagic Design, creators of DaVinci Resolve, the editing software I use, they just sent me a camera and some cool equipment for me to try out. So we're going to get the live drawing setup working over here probably soon. I got to make this video in the next few weeks, so we'll see, but definitely for the month of April. And I will be doing some like shorts and stuff, I think. Doing some sketching, charcoal, pencil. all sorts of stuff like that. Should be very good. Will Ramon be back soon? Yes, he will be back soon because he's in Paris right now. He's moving to Paris this summer, probably in the middle of the summer. So we don't know the exact date of that yet. He's going to be back soon. I don't know if he's going to be back on stream soon, which is definitely what you're asking. You don't really know about his personal life, or why he's in Paris teaching right now. But he'll be back, maybe on a stream, maybe not. I don't know. We're going to start filming our drawing course, our figure drawing course soon. That's our goal to get that out by the early fall. It's just a little bit difficult with him moving, so we'll see. Maybe we'll lock in on that on May or something. I don't know how busy he's going to be, but we'll see. People are very vehement and use a warm purple for shadows always and won't learn why. Yeah, exactly. Or like black, you don't see black in nature. And it's like, close your eyes, idiot. Like, how do you believe something that can be disproven by closing your own eyes? Like, that's like next level cognitive dissonance. And it's so common, too. And it's something that, like, if I heard it when I first started painting, I would have believed it, too. But it's so common. Hope we can do anatomy tutorials too. Yeah, that's kind of the goal with some of the live sketching stuff too. I want to do some figure and anatomy and that type of stuff in the normal format, but just live. Real Clip Farmer says, "Say my name, call me out. Say my name, say my name." Beaucoup tout le monde. What did I just say? Did I just say a slur? How was my French? Give my French out of 10. So that's what we got going on. I've been also getting back to just some regular drawing and painting. We're doing some critique streams today. Of course, that's what today's topic is. Everybody, thanks for coming in. And we're going to be looking at the Discord's critique challenge, which is portrait cast drawing. Nice little portrait ahead. And we're going to do some critiques on that one today. Had a lot of nice submissions here. I didn't count them all up, but we can take a look now. That's my face. Let me move my windows around. I didn't get super far on this one. I've been working on another painting over here too. So this one's... It's definitely been more than this. Maybe it hasn't. That's kind of embarrassing. I've been getting back into the groove of it. I only spent an hour on this one last night, and I will be getting back into this. This is not a reflected light. I just did the sketch in white for some reason. So, yeah. I'm just kind of experimenting with new approaches and stuff, but this was the critique. I can kind of introduce it more in a second, but we had all of these. Someone said, "Stop squinting. That's just the way my eyes are, you racist." Yeah, that's what I got in art school. Only use a mixture of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna or phthalo green and alizarin crimson to make black. It's kind of funny because you're just using more expensive pigments to mix black, like... You can use the cheap stuff to make black, or you can use the expensive stuff to make black. I'd probably rather just use the cheap stuff that's already in the tube that I don't have to mix together and make it, real complicated. So we'll get to that in the video, though, because I think people just need to change the way that they think about color in general. Yeah, it makes colors like dirty or whatever, and it's just people just don't have like an organic view of like what color is. People. I've been saving. Every time I'm in like the algorithm for. I'm like researching for these videos. I try to get into like the algorithm on Reels for this stuff, and so I save like all the videos that come up about color theory that I want to talk about. And as I've been getting further into this algorithm, I keep getting videos that are like, don't mix white and green to make a light green. It looks terrible. You have to mix phthalo green with cerulean blue and then a little bit of yellow to make this like beautiful aqua green. And it's like, they're just different colors. You just mix two different colors. You can't have like a wrong color. Well, you can have a wrong color if you're trying to, or matching something, but like, it's very funny. I don't know if I recommend any books on color theory. I have Color and Light by James Gurney. That's typically the recommended one. I haven't read it in a very long time though, so that's what I'm gonna be picking through before while I write the script for the video. I am going to read through that book again. I also have some older books on color theory from the 19th century that talk a little bit about color and paint mixing and stuff. I think there's a John Collier book and stuff too. Yeah, very good. So let's see. I guess we can get into it. All right. I also want to make some reels too, where I just do like crits on people's art. I might ask some of y'all from here if I can turn it into a reel or something when I give you a crit. If you're in the chat, that'd be nice. I kind of just want to do a few of those. Let me lean in here. All right, everybody, you know how it is. Every 2 weeks, I put out a new challenge on my Discord. This week's was drawing the portrait from the cast. Casts are just plaster castings or replicas of famous sculptures. These are all digital photos, so it's not really a cast. It's just like a 3D model of the, original. But anyways, cast drawing is a very, very old practice, or drawing from plaster sculptures or the original marble sculptures. This is a practice that goes all the way back, probably to the ancient Greeks and further, but certainly was picked up a lot in the Renaissance as a way to practice drawing, and was kind of standardized as typical training throughout the rest of Western art history. So it's a really nice way to practice your drawing skills, your accuracy skills. The reason why we draw like casts is because we're looking at famous Greek and Roman sculptures that are just very well made. They're already someone who's taken reality and kind of distilled it into something that's very beautiful and easy to understand, and is designed in an artistic and interesting way. So it might help you help imbue some of those design ideas on you if you're studying from it. As well as the white plaster is very easy to see light and dark, and to see the gradations of light and dark, whereas somebody's face, they might have, acne or different spots of coloration or moles or veins, and they have different color zones, like the middle of my face is red and the top of my face is pretty yellow, and, down here is kind of like cool greenish because I have some stubble. So you don't have to worry about all that when you're just drawing from a cast. So it makes a really nice example of how to read lights and darks, and that is just really good practice. So that's the reason why we draw from casts. I threw out, let me pull up the challenge thread. You guys had 4 reference photos that you could learn from. Right here. You guys have 4 reference photos that you could join from. If you guys haven't participated in any of these challenges before, you can join my Discord and come to the challenge announcements tab below. In the description below. Challenge announcements. A new one will be put out tomorrow. God damn, that went fast. I think we just need a figure. I think we need a figure. I do kind of want to bust out the oil paint soon, but a figure would be really nice too. So we'll see. We'll see. If anyone's got some good figures with underwear on, but still lots of anatomy and a decent pose, not too crazy, but a little bit crazy. I wouldn't mind, something that's slightly more dynamic. Throw them in the art challenge chat. That would be great. Very helpful for me. So I don't have to spend 2 hours looking for the perfect photo. I always give a little bit of advice and stuff for these. Also, I have a portrait drawing guide on my website, halftonestudio.art. I won't take you through that whole spiel right now. You had these 4 photos, Michelangelo's David, and this dude, I don't know who he is, that you could choose from. And we had a good amount of submissions here. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like we had, I don't know, maybe like 50 submissions or so. So a pretty good amount of them. And actually a really nice distribution of all the different casts. So people didn't kind of flock to only doing one. I think they're all, roughly about the same. So pretty good ones to learn from. And of course, the way that this works, if you're new here or if you want a nice reminder, is that I do kind of generally rank them and things that I want to talk about from bottom to top. But that doesn't mean that the person next to you is really even all that comparable in skill level, on a general scale from the large overall view, but on a more specific, smaller scale, you might feel like you're more skilled or less skilled than the person next to you. I don't know, get over yourself. It's not really a big deal. There's just kind of big ideas that I want to talk about. Not every single one of you is going to get a critique. I'm going to lump kind of groups of you together to talk about certain topics. So you'll see somebody who is at least near you get a critique, and I'll kind of try to group you in with them and tell you that's the same thing that you need to work on. This probably will not be a 5-hour stream. We'll see. 3 unskippable ads before this, so I turn ads off for the actual stream. So, you're gonna get many hours. Trying to figure out the best underpaint underpaint colors for different skin tones. What underpaint would you recommend for painting dark skin tone? Would be best for fair skin? You actually really don't need to underpaint if you want. If you want to do an underpainting when you're painting skin tones, that's totally fine, but it is actually completely optional and totally unnecessary for even for darker skin tones or lighter skin tones. They can be painted directly in one session. You just gotta hit the colors accurately on the first try. Or you can scrape and try again, you know, or paint directly over them. If you want to learn more about that, you should go watch my most recent YouTube video. I talked a little bit about 19th century painting techniques and also the history of painting techniques and underpainting techniques. All right. Any advice for someone drawing with a mouse? Use a pen or a pencil. Oh, sorry, pencil. Probably pencil. Pencils are cheap and free, and they're going to allow you to practice a lot more. I get this question all the damn time, and some of you Zoomers just got to just draw on a piece of paper. It doesn't matter if it's a sketchbook, printer paper, whatever. Number 2 pencil, eraser, all that stuff is going to be very effective and allow you to really hit, like, you know, learn a ton through that you would never be able to learn through your mouse. And then you can just save up your money, you know, $80 for a cheap displayless tablet. And then when the time is right, when you have that money and you can do that, then you know, go on and do some digital drawing. But you know, drawing with a mouse, I do it for fun sometimes, but it's not good for your wrist. It's not good ergonomics. It doesn't allow you to focus on the things that are important that you need to improve. Talking like XQC today. We're loving it. I feel like I'm getting fucking high to this music. I feel like I'm smoking mad weed with y'all right now. If you guys want to find a place to start, you can check the oh, if you can't join the Discord too. All right, we're going to get started here. If you can't join the Discord too, guys, there's a link in the description, but if you can't join it, you need to read the paragraph that's next to the link. It has a lot of solutions for reasons why you can't join. If you comment, the link is broken, bro, and you didn't read the paragraph and try those things, then I'm not going to respond to you because I already wrote the paragraph for you that has all the fixes on why you can't join it. You do need to join it on desktop, not iOS. You can enable it on iOS once it's on desktop. I should probably read it a little bit more formally and better, but you guys can figure it out. I don't know. I don't care. There's a literacy crisis happening with our youth. This is not a draw. I'm changing my layer names. I'm smoking that Shrek Swamp Donkey Kush. This weed putting my puss in boots. Type of weed that make a dragon and a donkey have sex, that make babies together. I didn't mean to use the S word there, sorry. Didn't mean to scare y'all. Two scariest words put together for chat, sex job. That fucking, that will blow a chatter's mind right there. Guys, it's part of the lore, it's canonic. It's part of the Shrek lore. You can get a small Wacom tablet for like 25 bucks. Yeah, you actually can get pretty small tablets. I wouldn't really recommend that you buy the tablets for like $30 that are like literally this big because it's just really small area to work on. I don't want you guys to hurt your wrists or be zooming in all the time. You know, get a tablet that's like a sketchbook page, you know, a letter size page at least. You know, pay 60 bucks. It's worth it. Otherwise, just a pencil and paper is better and cheaper and easier. Hey guys, does he only have drawings on the art challenge thread? It's only from the critique thread. When I send out the ping, it says in the paragraph in the ping, you must submit. If you've already submitted to the finals thread, that one is just there in case people want to submit their final work, but they don't want critique. There is a separate thread for the critiques. You gotta read the announcements. Guys, I don't spam with advertisements in the announcements ever. People just mute the announcements. I only use the announcements for nice things. That's what the announcements are for, but you have so much poor social credit, negative credit built up with everyone in the world that you just come in and you just smack mute on the announcements tabs and then you miss everything that I ever want to announce. That's important. I really have only self-promoted something like once in my life in that channel. Thank you for everybody for coming so much to the Jake Don't Draw live stream Super Show experience. My name is Welcome. Let's begin. You cannot upload now. All right. So I think with this first group of people, the things that I'm seeing, I like to get like a little bit red in here. So I think with this first group of people that I'm seeing, I need to turn down the music in my ear a little bit. I'm getting a little bit too groovy with it. This whole first row or so is, maybe you're like second row. Just some big kind of like larger like approach stuff that I want to see corrected. And there's a lot of you that are like very wishy-washy between like all three of these rows. Like, right, all three of these rows, like pretty much for the most part have some things I want to say, can learn from this. That one looks pretty good. Yeah. So let's see, which one should we grab here? Let's grab this one. Let's grab Mr. Broccoli Cut. I feel like this music is the Home Depot commercial music. All right, we're swapping. One bad song and that's all I need. I wish I could listen to freaking breakcore so bad, but I don't know any copyright free breakcore mixes. Can I look up I need like an Epidemic sound mix. All right, we'll keep going. All right, guys. So something that's very important. Oh, and there's something I saw with one of y'all too, right? You submitted this like big canvas here with a whole bunch of negative space around it. If you guys come to the critique stream every week, you're gonna hear me say this pretty much every time on every one. And you know what? The best you can do when you take a class is learn like 5% of it or 10% of it. There's kind of this idea that we get from schooling that if we learn Algebra 1, we're ready for Algebra 2. If we learn, trig, we're ready for whatever comes after trig, probably like quad or something, right? But really, that's not the way that things work exactly within art. There's really not that many super complicated art principles. There certainly are a decent amount of higher level theory ideas, but for the most part, it's really just about like a lot of repetition and practicing kind of a simpler base set of skills to a higher level. I think it's more like the martial arts or something like that, right? So a lot of you guys are going to hear me say the same things over and over again. You're going to be like, oh, I get it. But then you don't get it. And there's actually always a higher tier that you can kind of perform the same ideas to. There's a higher level that you can keep performing these same ideas to. And really, I'm still trying to work on this like very basic concept. And this concept that I want to speak on here is how we use the page, how we use the space, how we kind of organize information, and how we can approach things from general to specific to make things easier. That is always our goal in drawing, is to approach things from the biggest idea to the smallest. So when I look at something like this, and not too many people did a bad job at this, and actually a lot of traditional drawings, which I really appreciate. For me, I love to see it. But one thing that, beginners always do is they kind of start drawing like anywhere on the page, and then they, maybe, especially too, they'll start drawing like smaller on the center of the page too, because they know that as they, push further into a drawing, things tend to like balloon and expand, and they want to make sure that they have some space to grow. Or things, or also they just kind of position stuff wherever they start, because they're trying to just grasp at whatever start that they can get that will produce some sort of results. They're, just doing the best they can. But I think it's really important, and it also makes things easier if we think about the whole canvas, the size of the page. So, I want to think like if this was our page size, we'd want our drawing to be, probably get a little bit more space on this side just so it's more centered. We want it to be reasonably centered. We want it to be reasonably centered. There are like little rules and stuff like that where like, when I studied in Rome from a Russian teacher, I remember him saying like, oh, you want a little bit more space on the side of the cast that's getting hit, the light direction's coming from. You want a little bit more like white space there. There are little rules, but they're really not that important, and you can break them pretty much whenever you want, and it's not a big deal. Things like that are oftentimes just kind of like different little bits of dogma that get passed down, but there are nuggets of truth in them. But generally, if you kind of center something well, you engage the entire canvas, and you just have it like arranged pretty well, then it automatically reads is better, because like the read of this is like a little bit off-centered. It's a little bit small. We have all this white space. I have a harder time looking at it, and I know you might be looking at this and be like, well, Jake, just crop in, or this artist should have just made it bigger or whatever, right? Done this in the transform tool, and then it would have been fine and wouldn't have gotten this whole speech. But I think that everything that we make is like a study or a piece, or every study that we make is a piece of art at the end of the day, and it's really important to think of stuff like that, because we're like always making a piece of art, and we always want to be in that mindset that it's something that we can hang up on the wall or have approached in the right way, or have thought about those ideas, because that the reason why we study is to make art, is to get better, is to not just do studies, right? Like we're trying to work on some ideas. So that's kind of a fundamental idea that needs to happen every time. Announcements are for begging for boosts. I think I read from Frank Fowler that it's generally in good taste to have more space in front of the head when drawing a profile. Yeah, I think so. You wouldn't really. Yeah, I think generally, you don't want to like the character like staring straight into the side of the paper or the wall. You just want to kind of have some sort of like open arrangement of the lights. And if we think too, like if this is the page, like is this, are like this little shape and this little shape and this shape, like are these interesting shapes, like of negative space? Actually, yeah, I actually think that they're really interesting. Like they're not all perfectly even. Like this is kind of this big one, and then we have like lots of little ones, and we even have like a smaller one, and this kind of shape here is nice. So actually, I think this is like a pretty strong arrangement. I would probably get this a little bit closer to the bottom, like that, right? It's just a thought. Okay. When I said food for thought, some of y'all thought I meant taking these hoes on a date. So the way that we want to approach this is there's many different ways, right? Like I'm sure that you've all heard of like the Loomis method, right? Where you do like the circle and you connect up the jaw. It's kind of a lousy Loomis head. That's fine. Maybe put a little bit of cranium on, or you like cut off the side. It doesn't matter. That's more of like a way that I would associate with the idea of construction. But there's also, ways of drawing or approaching stuff where you're looking mainly for like bigger shapes. You're taking measurements where you compare things, right? Comparing the width to the height of things, and having the, general conception of where things are on, inside of these four walls is really helpful. If you know that this is, about the middle of the page, I'm just eyeballing it here, but you can measure it out. That like, I don't know, like 20% of the way down, you kind of get this angle like this, that the top of the head's going to fit in. And that like right below the top, if you take an angle like this, you're going to enclose most of the head. And that roughly in the middle, that's going to be the highest point. So we'd mark like the highest point, the lowest point when we're starting the drawing. And you might start out with something like this. And that would be actually a really strong way to start a drawing. And you can also, of course, it doesn't mean that you're like throwing out the baby with the bathwater and getting rid of the construction as well. No, like you can put the construction into that, and now that's allowing you to have like a higher degree of proportion. So just a few general starting methods. And generally in the starting too, I would really be careful of chasing down little shapes. That's kind of the biggest thing when we talk about working from general to specific. We really don't want to be getting caught up in all of these curls, because actually when I look at the curls of this, like I need to maybe do a complementary color. Right, like when I look at the curls like this is actually a more accurate description of like this segment like this. than this is, right? If you try to chase down all this, it ends up just looking a little like it's just too much, right? It's too much information for the beginning of the drawing. So we want to kind of just group stuff together and even it out, smooth it out, take the averages of things, because that's going to allow us to add on those smaller bumps later without them being out of control. It's just too much. It's too small of a thing to control early on. So that is a very important part of general to specific. If you want to find these busts, all references for free on my website, halftonestudio.art /references. There is a free portrait drawing guide to portrait. I spelled portrait wrong. There's an R. www. And we're pinning it. Boom. All the references are free, not paid. So those are some ideas that I want to see. I want to see like a little bit bigger grouping in all of these top categories, kind of looking for some of these large angles and to not chase down to the small things quite so much. In some areas too, like where you have like this big rounded curve, there is like curves in there, but actually again, for this level at least, it's better, I think, much better to describe and break down these things as this is actually more accurate. You know, two straight lines or mostly straight lines like this, it's actually much, much more accurate than you're going to be able to pull if you try to do this, right? So that's what I want to see at the early stages, is really trying to nail the proportions and sizes of those curves. And if the curve is difficult, you're always going to want to break it down into a straight line, right? And I think as you get more comfortable with drawing, or just as you please, as you like to do it, you should experiment with more free-form types of drawing, right? I'm getting very comfortable with proportions and stuff like that now. I don't always get the proportions perfect. I have some stuff to talk about with accuracy later on with you guys. But, you know, I really do try to start out my stuff now in a much more free way where, like, I am doing this type of stuff where I'm pulling longer lines, I'm letting my hand be really loose and relaxed. I think this is a really important skill to learn. But if you try to do that and you haven't put in the time, like doing a little bit of construction and accuracy work, like it becomes a little bit too fast and too messy. So you do have to put in the reps, marking like, okay, top, bottom, middle. I know that the large envelope has this shape to the head, right? And then, here's this was the top of the hair, and it kind of comes down and breaks more into these specific angles. And then, okay, here's the chin level, and maybe I take some comparative measurements, right? Like, you do have to put in your time and your reps working on that type of stuff in order to make this stuff feel a little bit more effective, or to be able to achieve accuracy with it, rather. And then at this kind of stage where I want to see you, basically mark the top, the bottom here. Maybe measure with your pencil too, like where the middle is. Maybe you take a big angle like this. I'm seeing that the neck and the head, it flows together pretty well. There's kind of this big angle like this coming out of the side of the head. And a way that you can do that too is you can just look at your reference, hold your pencil up in front of you, and match that angle that you're seeing in front of you, and put it right on your paper. It's a good way to get, 'cause sometimes angles are really complicated because they might be like they're moving three-dimensionally, not just flat to you. They're moving backwards in space. And so you're like, what angle is that? Just hold up your pencil and match it, and then bring it right to your page and go, oh, actually, it's like this or like this. So, maybe for the side of this face, I'm seeing something like this, which you're not too far off on. Maybe just want to pull it out a little bit more. And then we have this angle that comes in like this, very aggressively. Now David's proportions are actually really difficult. This is not an easy guy to get likeness on because they're very stylized, but they look very natural at the same time. So it's a very difficult image to do. So I don't blame any of you guys for missing any of these angles because I do myself. But maybe you see kind of two lines that are close enough together. You can just group them together and work out the specifics later. Maybe you want to start something like this. And then I want to see, you know, like a center line get thrown on. Never, ever, ever, guys, people will show you the center line all the time, but then there's like maybe 50% of you guys that see people demonstrate the center line. And you go, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then you draw and you don't put it down. I want to see the center line. It's very important. It's probably the most important thing. And it's that central axis that you build everything off of. And it's totally okay to put it down. You're going to be able to erase it later. It's not a big deal, especially if you're digital, right? But even if you are traditional, right, you are going to be able to erase it. It's fine. And it doesn't make you a weaker man for putting down a center line. You need to have a central axis to build stuff off of. If you have a model pick that you want to submit for the next challenge, just throw it in the art challenge chat. It's fine. Right, center line helps you achieve symmetry. It helps you achieve kind of stable proportions, the correct tilts between things. Right. We'll talk about that with some of y'all beginners. Right. In these next few drawings. Right, so I want to see, kind of throw that center line on there, and you know, roughly eyeball too, say, okay, this is the amount of space on the left side of the center line. Is that the same amount of space as this? Yeah, I'd say that this is about, like, right there. And you are going to have to make some guesses. There's always a level of guessing, but you need to guess. You need to guess and check, or else you're never going to get improved, right? You need to guess, and then maybe, you know, take a measurement with your thumb and your pencil, look up, you know, the comparative measurement technique. I can't do that. What I'm seeing too is when I look at this distance on this side of the center line, and you know, probably about this distance, a little bit slightly longer on this side of the center line because the left side of the face is turning away. The left side of the face is turning away. When I see this, like when I'm looking at these measurements like this, where you have like, okay, here, that looks pretty decent. Okay. Well, now look at the reference and I'm seeing, okay, this is really like probably about the same width as this eye socket, right? It's probably about this big, right? So if I stepped over, maybe even a little bit smaller, I think a little bit smaller, you know, I really feel like just moving my eyes back and forth between the reference, we're gonna want to close that in a little bit. And also that hair is ending, if I draw like a straight line, a horizontal line across, you know, at that brow level, and it comes out, look, at this angle, like this. Maybe even a little bit lower. All right. And I could also look and see like, okay, what's the angle between these two things? Boom, 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 like this. Now I do that on mine. Boom, boom, boom. Now I'm at this corner. I know now that I'm at this corner, that's where I want to pull in this next angle. So we were up a little bit too high. If I went to your angle, that's, you know, it's not the same, right? That's called triangulation. Very important. And this is only one half of the equation, but they're important skills for people to focus on and learn, especially when they're starting out. All right, distilling in this information and also just giving yourself some time too to just back up and check. Do the shapes look right? Do the measurements look right? Is that all the same? You know, get in a good sketch in there before you start throwing down any sort of line or tone or features or anything like that. I kind of want to make this black. Right, so if this is my center line, we get this little shape in here, right? Little pentagon shape. Boom, 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 boom. Right, that's the Pizza Hut. The Pizza Hut in the middle of the face. The middle of the face loves some Pizza Hut. What is this song? I'm Stunlight. There we go. Johann Sebastian Bach, Prelude in C minor. When's Discord age verification rolling out? I better not see any minors in the Discord after that, because that'll be illegal. Thank you, everybody. This has been the Jake Don't Draw Super Show live stream experience. Right. And then also, you know, at this stage too, like, I am talking about these like very rigid, like use straight lines, break stuff down, use a center line, construct off of it. These are very like rigid or mechanical techniques to finding accuracy. And they can cause stuff to be really stiff or to be a little bit, you know, too anxious, right? Too much scratchiness, too much moving stuff back and forth, you know, too much, you know, fussing with small things that don't matter. And it's important too, just to like always mention that like there are like characteristics, especially on David, guys, like super characteristic ideas about David, right? Like look at like the arch of these brows, right? Like this is a really essential piece of his character. These sort of like outwards moving, big wide cheekbones, and this very narrow face that kind of closes into a triangle. Like these are shape ideas that we want to think about and keep in mind. And when I'm drawing in this type of stuff, like I'm on the center line, but also like I do want to find that kind of same brow tilt, right? Like boom, I can think about the angle of that. Think about the negative space in between these things. And I do want that to be over there. And then also, you know, what's the angle that goes across these features? Probably like this, right? So make sure the top of this brow is lined up with the top of that brow, right? So it does take time. It might take you a couple hours or so just to get a decent sketch in if you're checking stuff like that. And the first time you do it too, it's gonna be very overwhelming, and you're like thinking of way too many things at once, and it's really scary, and you're like, oh, my old way was better. I'm getting better results in my old way. You know, now I'm like, you know, looking at all these angles and I don't know what to do, and I'm, you know, forgetting what I'm seeing, and it's just too much. But, you know, that's part of the normal experience. And if you turn away and run at that stage and go back to what you're used to, it's very hard to improve. So you need to get comfortable with the feeling of hitting that stage where you're frustrated and you're like, this isn't working, this isn't as good as my old way. And I don't want to see how many people are watching the stream. Kind of annoying me. Yeah, that's good enough. So, you know, it's most important to get comfortable with the idea of just making some bad art, to trying new things and like having it not work out your way, and also to make things that are like really unaesthetic and really unpretty just for the sake of like studying and trying something new. You know, that's kind of like the concern I have with, there are some accounts that have like, I see on Reels that have like made a lot of progress and you know, learned a lot, and they're documenting their learning journey, and I think that's great. One thing I like worry about, like if my every step I made was documented along the way, which I mean it partially has been, I would be a little bit worried that like, oh, if I do this type of study work, it gets way less views, you know, it doesn't look as cool and as grindy, or like I'm doing this new thing and I'm like regressing way back, and now all of a sudden I have all these people that are like giving me advice on all these different things, even though I'm just trying to like learn a new idea, learn a new approach, and it's not working. You need to have some time for that, where you're like not worried about these ideas, because I've just seen some like accounts, I'm like, oh, they're, you know, making a ton of progress, but I think 2 years, 3 years in, you start to hit a lot of those areas where you need to regress back and try new things. And it must be really scary to be online, to be sharing stuff and have people giving you their opinion all the time. And a lot of those people are wrong. Okay, let's, I'm gonna grab somebody else from this beginner category. Cool. I like the, looks like charcoal and stump technique. Maybe not. This looks like graphite or something, but then this looks like maybe charcoal. Maybe it's just graphite powder or something. And there's a lot of things that are looking pretty nice in here, but I want to get like a larger shape idea before we start to like pick apart all of this little stuff and get too specific about it, because you do have a center line here, which looks nice. Where like you can find some like kind of general angles, like you can find some general angles like this. Girl sweatshirt. What the fuck is this playlist? All right. I need a good game music playlist. We get Zelda. We can do Zelda. There is like a big angle here from the farthest back piece of hair to here that I want to see that get hit first. Let's do it this way. Like this earlier on, this. Kind of finding that straightness up here without getting too rounded and caught up on this. Like none of that stuff matters at all at this stage. Also, like compare the height of the entire group of hair just as like this flat 2D chunk. And like where would that drop down to on here? You know, maybe like right around like the eye level or a little bit below the eye level, right? If I took this and then move down like this again, you can do that with your pencil to see, right? So if I take this is my hair length, and I move this down again, yeah, right around there. So actually I feel like, you know, I feel like this looks a little bit short to me. But maybe we just need to pull the brows down a little bit, you know, to make up for that. And maybe sometimes you got to bump a little bit of both, right? So you bump the hair up a little bit, you bump the brows down. We'll find this here. Music's so quiet. It's calming. It's calming. It's relaxing me. I got lulled. Oh, there we go. You know, where does the hair line up to? Like right around the inside of this eye socket or the brow point too. We're looking at what's across from things and what's straight up and down from things too. That's called a plumb line. What is straight up and down from something? What's straight up and down from the center of the chin, kind of the side of the forehead here, center of the chin, side of the forehead here. That looks pretty good. Here's the side of that brow. And then like, what's like a big angle that we can pull in? And we can pull it in pretty casually at first. You know, this looks all right. One thing that I see that is, you know, I'm going to start pointing out a lot more too. This is our center line, right? It looks like it has a slight left to right tilt on David. And I think that you have that pretty good here. Like I like the center line that you put in here. Connects up to the center of the chin. And as we move across that, you know, from our landmarks, right, we can divide it into thirds if you're familiar with the Loomis method, right? A line across the brows, a line the bottom of the nose for the chin. As we move across it, we can look for landmark to landmark, right? So an important landmark is like the corner of the brows, these areas that jut out here on both sides. Maybe the corner of the lips, kind of, but you can, you know, smirk and tilt that. One side of the chin, the other side of the chin, you know, the top of this cheekbone, the zygomatic bone, and you can see where it tilts over here because it's changing angle and moving back down. And if you move and connect these points up, you're seeing that perspective or the angle that moves across the face, right? And these lines are always parallel, right? These lines, they're always parallel to each other. They don't really cross. They don't really have like a ton of convergence. The only way, you know, you'd have lines that would, you know, be really converging really fast is if you had some sort of like, you know, GoPro wide angle lens that was like right up here. You're doing some like fisheye lens. But pretty much in all scenarios, the angle that like your brow's at and your chin, you know, your nose, like all of this that moves across your face in this direction, it's always parallel when you're looking at someone. And so if we take, let's say, corner of the brow, here, and corner of the brow here where that angle changes, should be a slight left to right tilt. Right? And if this is the side of where one brow, the top of one brow is here, then that same tilt should go across and connect to the other side, right? And if this is the corner of one eye, well then the corner across the eye should be like this, right? Probably a little bit too much of an angle there, like this. And then the corner, or the inner corner of the eye on the other side should be here, right? Like this, like this, like this, like this, like this. Top of the forehead, a little bit more tilted like this. All of this parallel. You can see here, you have this tilt that's like this with your eyes. It's just not possible, right? The eyes are going to be aligned. You know, of course, people have asymmetry and stuff like that. But if somebody's got their, you know, eye that much further up, it doesn't look right. The Loomis method didn't work for me. Yeah, that's the beginner special. It's to try something once, it doesn't work exactly the way you want. You're trying to like rigidly follow it instead of understanding any of the principles, and then saying that it doesn't work for you and that actually the Loomis method is promoting proportions and everyone's standard proportions and everyone's different actually, and that's why it doesn't work, you know, all that stuff. That's the Reddit. That's the beginner TikTok special. So, and two, like I said about those rhythms, right? We have kind of these arcing rhythms that move across the face. We want to make sure that stuff is synced together. So, you know, put in your center line and put those lines across too. And when you have these lines, it's like really easy to check. Okay, this is 1/3 of the face. This is another third of the face. And then up to like the hairline, probably a little bit behind the hair, is another third of the face. First, I can measure with my thumb and pencil David's face and look, is David's face evenly split into thirds, or is 1/3 longer than the other? Probably the middle third is a little bit longer, you know, especially in this pose. But I would say that this distance that you have here is certainly significantly longer than the bottom one, and your drawing would benefit from just reducing that middle third a little bit so that it's still longer, but not quite as long. Right, like this. Then we can mark out kind of where the eyeball is inside of here. And let me just kind of clean this up a little bit so that I can see better. And I'll move the eye up too, or the mouth. Like this here. And, you know, maybe now that I look at that, there's like a little bit too much chin, so maybe like this, where the mouth will be, corner of the mouth, other corner of the mouth. We'll just kind of put it in there, nice and loose right now. All right, and if you have something like this, like all of a sudden, starts to feel a little bit more manageable, a little bit less like, you know, it's sliding around so much, and a lot more, you know, it's possible to get to this stage and to understand why, right? It's not easy. It's never easy. It's always easy. It always looks a lot easier than it actually is, but it's possible, right? It's possible. Maybe I dropped down the nose just a little bit too much. And you can make those little adjustments too just by taking your time and kind of leaning back in your chair and looking or squinting your eyes. That's why I'm always squinting my eyes too. It helps a lot. How to use these guidelines when drawing in charcoal? You just use them the same way. Just put them in light. You know, even if you're just lightly using even a Conte pencil, it's going to be fine. It'll easily erase out, you know, or at least it'll erase down to a value that is only noticeable if you have an incredibly small, tiny, subtle value range. You know, you're just never going to notice those tiny little fine lines that are running through the lights when you have super dark, thick shadows, right? But also, the reason why when we're doing the charcoal and stump technique is we use it in vine charcoal. And vine charcoal is very erasable. It erases out completely pretty much. So you don't have to worry about it. All right, so that's just some ways that we can think about, check our stuff, right? Oh, I want Dimension music so bad. I'm so mad it's copyrighted. I'll kind of throw this off to the side. It's nice like that. Why are these lines tilted downwards? Because of the 3/4 view? Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So why do I draw, when I'm drawing these lines across the face, you know, like why do these lines tilt downwards slightly? Or, you know, why would they tilt upwards, right? Sometimes they tilt upwards, sometimes they're completely horizontal, sometimes they tilt downwards. And the reason for that is, I can actually explain it very well with my mug here. The reason for that is when I take my mug of tea, your camera, the camera is actually very eye level with me right now. We're looking at each other at pretty much eye level. And right now, my mug is below that eye level. You're seeing into my mug. You can see inside the top rim. And when I hold this mug up perfectly in line with my eyes, it's just flat. You can't see into it, you can't see under it. When I hold my mug above eye level, right, you can see the bottom of it. But you can't see into the top, you know, even if it was on camera, right? You can see the bottom of it, but you can't see into the top. So when you're looking upwards on something, you know, you see the bottom planes of things, and you see things sort to, let me go back to the drawing screen. So if I'm looking at my mug horizontally, you know, perfectly at eye level like this is the eye line, then I just see it pretty much flat. But if I'm have the eye line like this, you know, and I'm looking at the mug and my eyes are up higher than it, right, then I'm seeing into that mug. Right, there's my hand grabbing it. I have no idea what a hand looks like when grabbing a mug. Something like that, right? There's my disgusting, messed up hand. And when I'm looking up at something, right, I'm gonna have one finger like this and one finger like this. Here's my claw, my crab claw. All right, when I'm looking up at something, I'm seeing the underside of it. And so this camera view is actually pretty at eye line. If we were looking up at David, right, we would see something. You know, if we were looking up at him, we would see kind of these lines wrap around the circle, and they would wrap upwards, just like they would wrap around this mug, like this, right? Have like an ear like this, right? And you'd have an eyeball, and a nose, right? And I'd see the underplane of that nose, just like I see the bottom of the mug. And if he's tilting his head to the left, right, we're above our eye level, those lines, they recede towards a point on the horizon. So it's a long story short, you know, you don't need to know all the horizon stuff. The reason why they're going down is because if he was looking at us completely flat, this is pretty reasonably at eye level. We're not really seeing a bunch of the bottom or a ton of the top. So if he was looking at us with his head completely flat, it would look pretty much like this. It would be pretty flat tilt, but he is kind of tilting his head to the side. So all we're doing is just taking that flat tilt across the brow and just doing this, right? Because he's just tilting his head a little bit. It's a long-winded way of telling you that, but it's important to know because sometimes we really are looking like upwards on something. Like with this, see, we don't really see a whole lot of the top of his head. Reasonably flat tilt across the face, but we are seeing like a lot of the underside of something. You know, if this guy were to tilt his head, we would be seeing lines that kind of wrap around like this and the center line like that. Whereas with David, our viewer is a little bit higher up. Our camera, our eyes are a little bit higher up. We don't really see a whole lot of the underside of the jaw, but we do see a lot of the top of the head. So this eye level, we're kind of looking a little bit more down on David, mostly eye level. This, we're a little bit mostly eye level, but kind of looking upwards. And that changes the way that the lines move across stuff. I actually do need to do like 2 weeks of just like hand drawing only. It would fix all my problems. If I just drew hands from like, you know, half from reference or like 30% from reference and then the other 30% from imagination, or there's actually more than 60% in 100. If I drew 30% of hands from reference and then 70% from my imagination every day for 2 weeks, I would fix all of my hand issues. I just have not done that. You don't want to know what I'm doing with the other 40%. Okay. So with the top row here, it's kind of a lot of the big angle stuff, like the big proportion stuff, you know, backing up and just asking yourself, like, does that look right? You know, does this guy look like the reference? Well, he doesn't really, you know, but why? Why doesn't he look like the reference, right? I'm not going to draw too much over this one, but like, why doesn't he look like the reference? Well, you have to think, you have to place an emotion to it. You have to place something to it, right? You might not know exactly why because you're, you know, still learning, which is perfectly normal, but like maybe you could put something to this, like, oh, he looks skinny, right? Well, skinny is something that we can work with now, right? Skinny means something that is too thin right? If we want something to not be skinny, we can just make it fatter, right? But there's another way to fix skinny too. We can actually just compress the height, and now he's not too skinny. And that's the same with like, oh, somebody looks too tall. You could shrink their body, or you could make their head bigger, right? It's the same thing. So look back up, ask yourself, okay, what do I feel about this? Why does this look not right? You know, is it too skinny? Okay, it's too skinny. Where do I need to add on that width? Like, is this right? You know, the width of this is right, but probably just need to get like a little bit extra in the face and in the jaw here, and then like correct the angle of the jaw a little bit here, and look for like the big angle of the hair sweeping across. Right. So it's kind of just a layer of checking those big proportions before you move on. And that kind of applies to a lot of this stuff to varying, you know, all these like first 3 rows, I would say, to varying degrees. Some are a lot closer than others, you know. Let me see. And it's totally okay to be very organic about these ideas as well. You know, you do have to practice them, you know, harder in isolation, but then, you know, always have time where you're like, okay, you know, I am going to try drawing a head like this. You know, I'm going to start just really loose with long, you know, flowing lines, and I am going to try starting out like this and see what happens. And oh, you know, it actually might be way easier for me to start out stuff like this because I'm not so caught up on all the angles and proportions. And then now I know when I get to this stage, I do need to like make sure that I have the right width and the height and stuff. You should always reserve like a little bit of that time for yourself. You know, we'll do one more of these. All right, I got a black pill. I got a black pill for some of the young men in the chat, young mustache growers. Do you use anything that grow your mustache, and do you have any tips to growing a mustache like yours? Here's the black pill, my friend. All right, I've never done shit to my mustache. I've never put oil on it. I've never done the damn rolly thingy. I'm not putting no Rogaine on it. I just was 23 one day and I was like, you know what? My mustache grows in like a little bit faster while shaving. Like maybe I could grow a mustache, and I'm unemployed right now. So I don't have to care about looking like a, you know, a criminal, to put it nicely. You know, I'll just try it. There is nothing that you can do to make yourself grow facial hair that you don't have. Okay. It's just genetics. You might not have it, and that's okay. And the important part, this is just life advice, fashion advice. I'm not super fashionable, but I've learned the hard way by being very unfashionable. And this is the way that anyone approaches anything new, like drawing too, right? You get excited about a new hobby. You go on fucking, you know, Reddit or whatever, or you're in the algorithm for this stuff. You see all these really cool things that people are doing. You try to do it yourself. You try to imitate, you know, you try to make some really cool anime girl paintings that are super realistic, like Pluvium, right? And you've never drawn before, and you're really bad at it, and they look horrible. And you keep trying to just grind out stuff like that, but you don't take the time to like learn about drawing or proportions or, you know, the anatomy of the face. You can keep doing all the, you know, fancy anime paintings you want. If you don't slow down and learn some of the more fundamental things, then it's going to be really, 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 really hard. It's going to be a long road. And the same thing goes for like fashion and dressing for yourself and, you know, facial hair. You have to do things that work well with you, okay? You only have one set of proportions on your body. I wore fucking skinny jeans when I was like 17, and they looked horrible because my body is a square. I'm sorry to everyone who thinks I'm 6'8". I'm 5'8". I have wider shoulders. You know, I'm like 160 pounds right now. Like, my legs are short. I have wider shoulders and a longer torso. And I have thick legs. I look really bad in fucking skinny jeans. I look really bad. It was 2016. It was 2016, so it was a different time, okay? That's crazy. I'm old. I'm boomer posting. I was looking at people on Reddit that would wear these really cool outfits, you know, with like skinny jeans and interesting types of shoes and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to do that. So I would just put the same things on. They looked horrible. They looked so bad. I cringe at myself so hard thinking of this. You might not have the mustache in you, but you got something else in you that you can work with, okay? You got to work with your body. You got to work with your proportions. You got to work with what you have. Let's get back to drawing. Don't try to derma roll your face into growing a mustache. It's never gonna look good. I promise you. It's all genetics. There's nothing you can do about it. I'm sorry, but you can find a hairstyle that works well for you. I promise. How do you not get bored making these when you kind of get accurate proportions? Like, you figure it out and it's just boring, I think, when you start to paint, so you have that challenge. I think the people that say questions like that, and I will get to fixing this, I always find this question, you know, very interesting, because the people that ask me this stuff, like, how do you not get bored when doing a study? They always say, like, well, one, just it's okay if you don't find studies fun. You can find other ways to make studying fun and, you know, choose topics that you like and still improve. But I always find the people that say, like, oh, I can get the proportions good, like the drawing's easy, like I just like start painting and it's just boring and I don't want to do it. I always find that those people have some pretty big problems with their proportions and their drawing skills and their lack of understanding. And that those people tend to be very, you know, people who are very good at like zooming in and like color picking, or, you know, just copying photo references really well and, you know, using soft brushes to, you know, blend stuff and make it look, you know, just like their reference. That type of shit, it's always very boring. You are right if that is the way that you draw. The way that this stuff is fun for me is that I can approach it in a million different ways because I understand the underlying principles of how to approach these ideas, right? I know that I can start out a drawing, you know, only thinking of angles and trying to get this like really accurate angular way of doing it. And I could only use straight lines and like really kind of hatch stuff out. There's some like interesting drawings that come to mind that I won't be able to pull up easily. I know that sometimes, you know, like I can imagine where that skull is under the head, and I can place and do the construction and get, you know, really accurate constructive drawing and think about the planes of the face and stuff like that. I know that I can start really organically too and start to like, you know, just think about ideas and let my mind flow. And I know when I can lock in and choose different points of proportions and how to look for like, you know, these points of the brows and how to take an angle across them just mentally. You know, and where and how to look for those proportions. I know how to start in a million different ways because I understand, you know, at the end of the day, it's all just about understanding your construction and your accuracy and your shapes and stuff like that. And I like experimenting with new ways to do that. You know, that's what I was doing on this one, right? Like, this white line is really bothering me. I just did the sketch in white. Right? Like, for me, like, I want to focus right now on like starting really, really organically, you know, doing longer, straighter lines, you're not doing a ton of measuring, seeing how accurate I can get without having to check in too many times of measuring, using all sorts of different brushes and getting different textures and effects, playing with different color ideas, you know, using my understanding of materials to apply, you know, different sort of textures or value ranges onto different things. Like, there's always a million things. It's just like a playground. It's just like going to a jungle gym, doing a cast drawing for me, and I can try out all those different things. If your only way of approaching this stuff is like, how accurate can I get it to the photo? And I'm going to liquefy the hell out of it, and I'm going to overlay it on the photo too, to like check the proportions, and I'm going to like try to match everything I see, you know, bar for bar, exactly like it. Yeah, it's boring. It's totally boring. Like, I'm fully with you on that. You know, that's why I don't get bored of it. And also, the proportion and the stuff, the construction, like, it just goes so deep. It's so much more than just like getting the angles right, you know? And you really see that, you know, I barely do any critiquing. I just fucking talk. I don't care. All right. I see this all the time. You know, people are like, oh, how do I want to make my paintings look like Bouguereau? How does Bouguereau does this? Or, you know, how does this 19th century painter, I want that to look like that. But then all they do is just paint, you know, photocopy stuff, or they just paint portraits from Pinterest and stuff. That's not how Bouguereau painted. It's not how we learned to paint. Like, you are never, ever, ever, like, how do I learn from Mucha or this person or any artist, you know, Sargent? You are never going to get closer just like copying a bunch of stuff off Pinterest. You need to like learn about how did they learn? How did Bouguereau learn to paint like that? That's probably the way you should paint. You shouldn't try to paint how you think Bouguereau painted, right? Like it's very simple, but nobody does it. Almost no one does it at all. And the way that, Bouguereau learned how to paint was he learned how to draw. He did charcoal figures, right? He did the cast drawings. He did the charcoal figures. He developed a really strong understanding of form and anatomy and lighting and how edges work and how you can simplify things and how you can work on constricted, time spans, how you can make large scale images. And then he started painting, and he developed really sophisticated understandings of color and, naturalism and light and how to apply the paint and different thicknesses and how to work, again, on really constricted time spans. And also at the same time, he's doing compositions and little sketches, and he's making, themes on biblical or historical ideas, and he's executing all these like tons of stuff in his sketchbook, and his sketchbook looks really sloppy and messy, and there's all sorts of like little compositional sketches and fun little drawings that are just for him, and he's making little caricature drawings. It's like you haven't done a single day of that in your life, and you're like wondering, how do I paint like Bouguereau? By doing pretty much the exact opposite of what you're doing. That's the thing that gets me more than anything else. I don't know what the original question was, guys. I don't know what the original question was. I don't know a damn thing about what the original question was. Would you ever go to a Russian school? It's not a good time to go to Russia. they got some shit to figure out. I did study with a Russian trained teacher for a couple months. Very, very skilled artist. But I don't think you need to like pack up your whole life and go to St. Petersburg and like live this fantasy in order to, like, you can learn an incredible amount online, and also you can forge your own ideas and learn from the past and read books and take lessons online, and you can get really, 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 really good and have your own ideas. You don't gotta like sell your soul and go to Russia to learn how to draw. I don't know if it's worth it. They got cracked schools. It's worth it. I'm not sure. Because there's a lot of stuff that they do at those Russian schools too that's like not super that like they make really great students and they make really good art, but like there's a lot of stuff that they do at those schools that students don't like. There's a lot of stuff that like burns students out really hard that isn't actually very helpful. I do, the Russian schools do have a general better kind of academic, pedagogical approach. Like the way that the entire curriculum is structured is better. Because they do focus on like making images and compositions and kind of practical application of stuff, and also they let people be a little bit more free. But I'm really, it's free, but they all do kind of paint in the Russian style, so kind of hard to what really is free, right? But they also do a lot of stuff. Loganov, Ivan Loganov, great painter from the Repin school. I remember him talking about like all the drawings, like detailed drawings of like bones and stuff like that we do. Like it's really not that helpful. And I totally agree that like doing a ton of like bone drawings for a year is like it's not the most effective thing ever. And it really depends on what your goals are. Okay. We're gonna talk about hair here in a minute. There's definitely some people in the middle that I want to talk about with hair. Right, so this is what I was talking about with the last person a lot. This is what I was talking about with the last person a lot. Like we have like the corners of our brows here, and we have this angle between them. And this angle is like, it looks like basically flat, but maybe a slight left to right tilt. Like that's kind of what I'm gonna go with. But here you have this angle that's tilting down kind of like this, right? It's a little bit severe, but like this is the angle. That's not the angle, so that's really what I want you to pay attention to here. As soon as we bring this up a little bit, gonna look a little bit better, a lot better, I think, actually. Likewise too, like what's the height of the hair, right? Like how much space, get on the right layer. How much space does the hair have here? Like this. If we were to drop this down again to like here, maybe take us like a little bit into the brow. But with you, if I drop this down again, like it kind of takes us to above the brow. And also just without even like doing a bunch of complicated stuff, like just looking back and forth, this just looks a lot taller than this. So maybe that's the way that we should approach it, right? This just looks a lot taller than this. It just needs like a little bit extra, and that's going to help balance out the proportions a lot. Might not even be quite that much. There's also like this general like kind of fantasy that we have about like, you know, these artists like, oh, you know, these are the Russian trained artists or whatever, like they're like, you know, gods and they can do anything, or like this person from the industry can do anything, or like this person from, you know, whatever Atelier or Florence, you know, they're like, they know painting, right? But the painting is so wide and it's so broad and it's so difficult that there's no one person. You know, this goes back to like, you know, Designe or versus Galore or whatever the heck, however the heck you say it, Gorlami. Back in the Renaissance of like, you know, the draftsmen versus like the Venetian painters like Titian and stuff. Like there is no person who knows how to paint. Like there's people who are really good, but there's no one out there. You know, nobody goes and they get, you know, a 6-year education and then they can just do anything and whatever they want, right? It's like a lifelong pursuit. And a lot of people, they don't really understand that. They think that like when they kind of idealize it so that when they think like any one person is like is good at something, then they just kind of know everything. But you know, it's just not how it works. It's a lot more than that. What do you feel about digital modeling for massing studies? Yeah, I think 3D modeling is one of the best ways, best supplementary things you can do to improve your drawing skills. 100%. Organic sculpting in ZBrush or Blender? I think the organic sculpting in Blender is probably fine. Better Golden Age Russian or Dutch in terms of painting? What the hell is the Russian? There's what Russian Golden Age? Are you talking about like there's so many different movements? Yeah, okay. Basically kind of the same angle ideas, big proportion ideas, grouping, straight lines. I see, unlike most of you guys, where we can back up a little bit and look for, you know, the rhythms that tie things together, how they fit together. You know, also like maybe for you, I said Sajal last time and you said I pronounced it wrong. So Sagil. So for Sagil here, like, you know, I think you're erasing and you're doing like a ton of this stuff, like until you erase like every line like a million times. Like, you know, maybe for you, you do need to like kind of just loosen up a little bit, pull longer lines, and it's okay if a line is inaccurate at the start. Like just hit the big general ones, like, oh, these are probably reasonably accurate, right? But then make sure you sync up stuff across, right? Sync up stuff from side to side, look for the rhythms that connect things, right? Is the angle that's going through these eyes is like, feels a little bit too tilted. And then like the distance from here to here is definitely like a little bit too long in the middle third versus like the bottom third, right? It's easier to check that kind of, just mark this stuff out at the beginning, give it a check, give it your best try. I wouldn't go back and forth so much on stuff. Basically the same for all of these. Yeah. I want to talk about some value stuff. Do you think you will learn from drawing these references than painting them? Since with painting, it's easier to go back and forth. I don't think either is easier. Well, I think painting is like kind of hard, a little bit harder than kind of. There's the elements of painting that are like a little bit harder than drawing, just because you're kind of managing the drawing without being able to see it. But I think like a lot of you guys should be drawing, just because it's a more limited kind of rule set or tool set that you can kind of practice within. Rather than painting, which is just like you're managing like too many things at once and it's just a little bit too overwhelming, and you don't focus on like kind of the big proportional ideas or angles or stuff. I don't think I said I wanted to try out acrylics. I don't think I would really be better at or worse. I think I could try acrylics and it would, you know, maybe I will one day, but I think it would make almost zero difference at all on like, I think I would paint like totally normal. I think it would be kind of boring. I paint in a very direct way anyways. I don't really do a lot of like wet into wet mixing or like, you know, blurring edges or whatever. Like it's just like digital painting. It's not really all that. I think it'd be Pretty much the same. Okay, so some, a lot of the construction stuff, this is a good one. This is a good one to kind of introduce some value ideas on, though. As I get down this list, like a lot of the construction stuff, probably, up until here, is still like a pretty big factor. Like kind of syncing up those angles, getting those center lines in, looking for like the big shapes and stuff. It is still a big factor. Getting it arranged on your canvas, like you have to put the time into that. And it's also just hard. So like don't be frustrated with yourself if you don't get it. After this, you go, oh, Jake explained it and it's easy now, and then you try it and it's just like just as inaccurate as normal or even worse. Like it just happens. I think like D&D analogies are nice for drawing. Like as you get better, you get like a roll modifier on your dice, right? So like you have a higher chance to roll something high. You get like a +6 or whatever, right? To every one of your rolls. You can always roll a 1. Like, trust me, if you're not paying attention, if you're not thinking, if you're trying to skip a bunch of steps, you can always roll a 1 in drawing. And games like that are always deeper and more frustrating and harder, but more satisfying and rewarding, to play games like that. You can be as good as you want in like Counter-Strike. You can still like peek a little too wide and just get insta headshot, right? It just happens. Nobody like in like a lot of competitive games and stuff, like no one has like a 90% win rate or something, right? At the top of the game. Like, the best players have like a 53% win rate at the top of their game. Just as you get better, you have a higher roll modifier. It becomes more likely that you don't roll, that you don't roll super low, but it happens. The blending in acrylics is hard. There really just isn't any blending in my typical process, so it wouldn't make a difference. You just mix it. You just, instead of blending, even in oil painting, you don't blend paints together on the surface. You just mix the right tone and put it in. Bro, collab with other art YouTubers like Ben Valentine and Andrew Tischler. I've talked to Ben a few times. He's pretty knowledgeable about areas of history that I'm not super knowledgeable about. So we've had some conversations and stuff. Yeah, I just don't really have like a, you have to like make content with somebody. So it's a lot to sit down with somebody. Cool. When we're talking about lights and darks, now that we're like getting a little bit more accurate, a little bit more proportions, there's still some construction stuff I think here that is falling flat, but kind of grouping our shadows together would help this a lot more. So this is an area where like, understanding our shadows and our shadow shapes will really help add into this stuff. So moving into this next portion, I want to focus on values, lights and darks. And how we can make them work for us, right? So what I'm seeing here is you have a lot of visual information. You have chased down all those individual shapes in the hair. It looks like hair. There are some things that feel pretty 3D in here, feels pretty proportionate. Like you're not super far off on the proportions, but it also still doesn't feel super realistic. And that's because your lights and your darks aren't grouped together. So, the way that I could explain this is, let me, if I have like a sphere like this, right? The way that a lot of people like to, or think about, a lot of the way that, people like to think about drawing is they have like, they put in like, they have maybe like the separation of their lights and shadows, right? And then they're like, okay, it's, darker here. And then there's some like reflected light down here. So I want to make sure that goes in. And then there's, like these little divots and stuff up here. And like, it gets kind of darker up here. And, there's like spots of light in here and, some highlights down here in the shadow. And like all of a sudden it just it feels very flat, right? There's kind of too many values and too many interacting with each other in ways that just they shouldn't or can't interact because of physics and stuff. So the way that our lights and darks works is that we have basically a separation, a grouping between our lights and our darks, right? There is a point where the light runs out of energy. It's called the edge of the shadow, the terminator line, where all the energy is terminated, right? That would be right here. And once it hits this point, it turns into shadow. It cannot possibly exist. It cannot be bright enough to be, you can't have any of these values inside of the shadow, right? Because the shadow is just visual information, you know, visual numbers that say, hey, you know, this area has a value range of 100 through 30, right? That is the range of all of my lights. We're out of energy now. Once we're in the shadow area, we can only move down from 30 down to 0, down to black, right? You can't have a value like this inside of your shadow, because then you would have a light source inside of a shadow, and you can't have a light source inside of a shadow because a shadow is a lack of light. And so you have to be really, really careful when you're drawing and painting not to mix your lights and darks together. And it's most common in areas where there are like reflected lights, right? Like under the chin here, right? So you want to add that reflected light in, and so you add some values like this in. And, you know, this still is like a very soft and nice looking sphere, so it still kind of holds 3D, but we're starting to flatten out. We're starting to lose a lot of those ideas of form, right? It starts to not make sense to our eyes. And if we add too much of that information, like all of a sudden it flattens out kind of a lot. And it doesn't, you know, especially if we start mixing some dark stuff into the lights, then it kind of completely flattens out. So you need to remember that like your lights and your darks are two groups that are completely separated, and they do not ever mix, right? They do not mix. You can't have a light in a shadow because a shadow is a lack of light. And so what we want to do when we first establish our drawing, and there's actually some nice examples, you know, this is pretty much always what you should do. Like you should always group your lights and your darks into one group, or into two groups, right? Into two groups that are separated from each other. So on this guy, you know, we do have like all these reflected lights and stuff inside of these shadows on the hair. We just want to simplify stuff, make it really easy for ourselves, and separate all this stuff fully. I'm gonna be a little bit more aggressive here because I don't want to dig through all this. But honestly, you should and can start out your drawings with shadows that are this broad. It's actually really easy to carve those lights back in. What will you do with bounce light that's within the shadow? I will show you, right? This side of the curl is in the shadow, right? This side of the curl in the shadow. We want to just group everything together. You don't got to push it down. Normally you don't want to push it down all the way to black at the beginning, but you can make it like reasonably dark, you know, the average tone of the shadow. And this is in the shadow. And this is in the shadow. It's a nice time too to check your shapes of things, right? Right, this is when you want to be checking your shapes, because it's really easy to kind of sit back, squint at the canvas a little bit. Right. And see the big light and dark read. Under the nose too in here. You know, I know it seems like a little bit crazy. Kind of just use my finger to smudge some of this together. Paper towel, paper stump. That's what the paper stump is for. Right, but now we have like a really strong separation of our lights and darks. Get rid of all this extra visual information. Right, and all of a sudden, you know, I drew on top of your layer so we can compare it, but honestly, this has, like, look at the read of this from far away. This actually feels a lot stronger. I want to grab the original. Let me grab the original here. What do you think about water-soluble oil painting? I used water-soluble oil painting instead of normal oil paint for years, actually. But I just stopped using it because basically you don't really want to use water to thin the paint because water just has some weird properties. It makes things like look kind of cloudy. and it's not doesn't work the same as like paint thinner or something, so it kind of messes up the value of it. It also just dries kind of strange, and also I don't paint with a lot of paint thinners normally. You don't need to use thinners to paint, so water soluble paint really only makes the cleanup better, and to me, like, it's not like that's a nice perk, but there's not that many like high quality water soluble paints out there. I'd rather just have a wider range to access better quality paints. So here's the big read from back here on yours, and here's the big read here. One feels, I think, a lot more like the reference has a lot more of a strong impact. Bro, it's literally off of proportions. It's not the shadow problem, it's wrong. Yeah, so multiple things can be wrong at the same time. And, sometimes we focus on talking about and teaching different concepts in order to illustrate a point without clarifying every single possible example, because that would be bad teaching, actually. It would actually make it so bad to teach that you wouldn't be able to get anything right. Because different students need different things at different points of their development. And your proportions and accuracy, there's kind of always a never-ending struggle of getting that closer to being right. It's pretty much like you can always kind of chase closer on getting that, and people know that their proportions are off, and it just takes a lot of time and a lot of mechanical accuracy to get better at those skills. But they're actually really probably not the most important thing. They're highly overvalued by people. So, it makes people feel better when they think like their proportions are better, but there's actually a lot of like bigger concepts that allow us to hit proportions better, like even simplifying light and dark like this. It allows us to check our big shape read, to back up, to look at how things work. And even simplifying things like this, I think, improves the accuracy a lot, because there's more than one way to improve accuracy. And that having kind of a more dynamic, organic approach allows us to think about these ideas in a more like fun way, and to approach the same problem from multiple different angles, rather than just being like, your middle third is like slightly 1 millimeter too long, and everything has to be at the right exact angle, and I only know how to copy photos exactly. I don't actually understand the principles of design or composition or how to manage values. So now that we have those groups of lights and dark separated, there are like lots of little ones in here too. And this is what when I was just sketching last night, like I just throw like a bunch of visual information in. You can be really loose at this stage. You can do a really nice drawing and kind of like really try to lock in those shapes exactly. It's okay. It depends on the, again, the level of accuracy. I'm not going to tell any of you guys that like one curl is 2 millimeters too high, right? Like you can design the curls however you want, as long as they look nice, as long as the design is nice and that their overall proportions and shape of them are nice. Bro said it's off on proportions and misspelled it. You got the proportions of your word wrong. And also like when you take a break and look at this stuff, like, yeah, we could probably like close in the hair over here so that it has a better shape too, and I think it's easier to see because of that separation. So now we know that our lights are within the range of like the brightest point of the paper, which is like, for you it's brighter because this is just a dark photo, but they're within this range all the way down to the shadows in this range. So for you have a range of lights that exist, let's say from like 25 here on my color picker up to the white of the paper, which for me is right here, right? For me is right here. So you can pick anything you want within here in order to model your form. Right? And you can push your darks down further in order to get into these deep crevices. So this is where a nice, charcoal pencil comes in. Right? This is where the Conte pencil is really good if you're using charcoal. The Conte pencil is really nice. It sticks to the paper, unlike Vine charcoal, and you can kind of push deeper and darker in, and find these kind of accented points. And accents are actually really the main driver of a lot of drawing, right? And implication. Drawing and painting is a lot, and this is why I'll shit on some guy who like wants to come in here and be high and mighty about mechanical accuracy, is because a lot of drawing is really about implication, and painting especially, right? Because you're always making some sort of design decision when you are drawing or painting. Because you're not drawing like my cellular structure. You're not drawing my mitochondria, right? Like you are making some sort of decisions about what level of detail you want to go into. If you want to show every pore on my face and, you know, further and further and further. So you do have to group things. You have to decide values for those things. You have to think about how the light hits them no matter what. And you can render and push things as far as you want or as little, you know, as you want. And as long as you set up the big read, you have the principles that are, you know, correctly, you know, assigned and constructed, then there's plenty of styles within that, right? You know, like we know that, and I can pull up, let me just pull up 2 paintings here. Why doesn't Google pull up the exact painting I want exactly when I want? God damn it. All right, we'll just pull. Oh, this is the one I want. But it's the worst picture ever. I know you guys can't see this. I'm taking a screenshot of a video. This is not good quality, but that's fine. Right, like we have like an image like this by Sargent, who is by no means an accurate painter. He does not get every angle right. You know, and then we have an image. All right, I'm doing this one fast. I can do this one fast. Assets, Master Artist, William Adolph Bouguereau. High-res portraits. Boom. And then we have a portrait like this by Bouguereau, right? Which is like stupidly high resolution. Right. You can be wherever you want on the scale, right? Like I am never ever going to tell somebody what type of art you want to make. And any of my critique is completely invalid the second that you say that you made something for fun or that you made something because you wanted to make it or that it's your personal style. You literally can, it's my style, however you want out of anything in art. It's not, I'm not the art police, and it would be really stupid for somebody to go around and start telling, you know, people. It's just like, even if you don't like, you know, contemporary art or modern art or whatever, the argument applies. And if you try to like logic your way into saying that Bouguereau is better than contemporary art because of whatever sort of restrictions, if you try to go down that, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You know, I don't care. I don't care at all about trying to assign labels like that. Your art can exist within whichever level of simplicity that you want, and somebody like Bouguereau is going to model insanely delicate transitions. You know, like we're transitioning here within ranges of like 5% in order to make the gradation move around the nose in a very subtle and nice way. But with Sargent here, like it's all one flat tone for almost the entire light side of the face with like just a little bit of hue variation. Sargent's really good actually at hue and color. He's actually spectacular at color and kind of the overall value. But this is like not a well-drawn or well-modeled chin or anything like that, right? So these types of decisions are up to you as an artist. What you do have to get right, or rather, the reason why I started saying this is because like implication is a really strong part of painting, right? That's why we use kind of accenting marks and putting down like a general tone. If you want, you can, you know, if you want, you can, you know, use really dark charcoal powder, or really finely hatch, you know, the shadows and super evenly fill in all of this and really delicately work it out and make it like super perfect, even transitions. That's your prerogative. If you want to do that, you can do that. Maybe you're someone who likes to move faster, who wants to just say like, okay, you know, this is the shadow. I'm going to just drop in, you know, some hatch marks, hit it with a stump a little bit, and boom, like this is like a good enough level of resolution to me. And, you know, it's achieving the goals that I want to make. That's just how most paintings are. If you look at like, you need to have that skill to be able to choose when and where you kind of push into stuff, you know, instead of just photocopying and pushing into everything and, you know, shooting for the highest level of accuracy. Because if you want to make, you know, some sort of narrative painting, if you want to make some sort of like large painting or some sort of complicated thing, anything that's not just a portrait that's super finely rendered, it's not possible to push into the highest level of detail to do, I almost said to do that Bouguereau level of painting. Bouguereau did do narrative paintings, but even his like, you know, large narrative paintings, when you actually get in a little bit closer on them, they are much simpler than like those super finely rendered just portraits or just kind of figures. Although he was like 60 years deep into his career and just popping off super hard. So he was just really good at that point, and he kind of could push in. But there is always some level of interpretation or pushing or design decisions. You know, it's not just about pure accuracy. And so that's why I don't want to like push those ideas. And that's why knowing how to set down general tones and also, you know, again, like where do I find like those darkest points and how do I want to control the transitions within that helps a lot. Making sure that those groups don't spill into each other. Right, and I have an easier time looking at my shape language here too. Right, so, you know, we do probably need to just take a little bit of a, you know, a dirty, like a Conte stump or something and just kind of push in here. Like I probably would push this side of the face down in shadows, but I wouldn't push this side of the face down in shadows because look, compare this tone here to this tone here. This is actually pretty light, so I really don't want to make this shadow any dark. This is the lightest shadow of any of my shadows, and it has actually a sharp edge, so I kind of smudged it there, but I would like to keep some of the sharp edge on there. So this, you know, if this is the range of my shadows go up to 30, you know, here, and they go all the way down to 0. You know, this is the working range that I have for my shadows. Like anything in here is a shadow. The only thing I can't do is start taking lighter tones and being like, oh, there's some reflected light in here. Right? Reflected light is still within the shadow group. It's just a lighter point. Right? And if it crosses the... where's my layer here? Reflected light, you know, is still within the shadow group. It can be this light. If this is my groupings of stuff, I have a little bit more range here. You know, it could be, you know, this light or so, right? But it can never be a halftone, right? Because now it's not a reflected light, it's a new light source that's shining on the object. I have just a new light bulb down there, right? And if you need it explained in a little bit more of a logic-y way, you know, if you are interested, like, you can just think like you have like these particles of light that are like traveling down. And the way that I like to think about it is you have like, you know, a little ant, a little dude, and like he hits the surface and he runs and runs and runs and runs. You know, and as he gets to the equator, to the terminator line, which isn't always the equator, it doesn't have to be in the middle. As he gets to the terminator line, you know, he gets more and more and more and more and more tired, right? And as that rate that he gets tired gets darker. And then here, he has a freaking heart attack. He drops dead. And now, you know, you don't have any energy, right? You don't have any energy to move around in here. If you know, the guy like comes down here and he like bounces up or whatever into here, I don't know exactly how to explain the physics of that properly, but I need to reread. I need to read some How to Render by Scott Robertson. I don't have the right analogy for that, but the dude's fine. You know, he's in the death area, okay? He's death pilled, he's death maxing, and he can't be any brighter. My analogy fell apart, guys. My analogy fell apart. He can't be, you know, this guy and this guy don't mix, all right? Capiche. Capiche, capiche. Did that guy message again? I'm curious. Nope, he did not. Yeah, basically you lose a lot of energy on the bounce, so that you can't. But I don't know the exact physics of it actually, of like how that works. Proportions are one of the most important aspects. How important is measuring proportions when getting a feel for them, then getting a feel for them by eye and experience? I think you gotta measure to improve your eye. I think that's a really important concept. So with you, like this is a very similar kind of related topic where you picked a value scale, right? Where you kind of evenly step down in value all the way. And then you were like, okay, these two are my shadow and these two are my lights. And that actually technically does work, right? Although you're hitting 55 in here. Oh, this is your shadow. Anything like under 55. I think you are like getting too light in here where this is shadow. But the reason why this doesn't feel very three-dimensional is actually, well, I'm back to the, got so much light theory to talk about today. What image is this? It must be another one from the website. So we're back to this. The problem is that you can't say, okay, this is 100 out of 100. This is 90. Or this is 60, this is 80. This is 40. This is 20. This is 10. And then everything under 40 is my shadow. You know, everything under 40 is my shadow. So then I get this. Like this just looks, technically you are following the lights. You are following the rules, right? Like you do have you are getting like your lights and your darks are not mixing, right? But like this just doesn't look very good for some reason, right? And the reason for that is because it's not actually how light works. Light doesn't fall off at a linear rate. So light doesn't fall off from 100 to 90 to 80 to 70 to 60 to 50 to 40 and slowly get darker, right? It's which is what very intuitively you would think, right? You would think that I should just be able to lay out, 6 values like this, chop them in half, from white to black, or mostly from light to black, chop them in half. Half of them are light and half of them are dark. But there's something called Lambert's law of emission. It's a physics thing. It's not a drawing thing, but it's just how things work. And it actually states that the way that light works is much more like this, right? Like which one feels more three-dimensional? Right? Much more three-dimensional here. It's much more 3D, something like this. And so the way that Lambert's law works very, very simply is that light doesn't fall off at an even rate. It doesn't go from 90 to 80 to 70 to 60 as it rounds around the corner. Light actually falls off at kind of like an exponential rate. So if I were to draw like that out, right? Like people think that like as light goes around the corner, it gets darker, right? Maybe this way, right? It goes down in value. But the way that things actually work in real life is that things like to stay the way that they are. This is like maybe like a physics or a chemistry thing. I don't know. I'm probably making that up. But things like to stay the way that they are. Things like objects in motion like to stay in motion. Objects that are still like to stay still. And so lights like to stick to where they already are, right? So if a light is really bright up here, it actually doesn't want to shed off a ton of energy really quickly. And if a light is a shadow, it doesn't want to jump up to being light really quickly. And so what you get is this sort of thing where the light falls off kind of like this. So what that looks like is the light stays incredibly bright, stays very bright, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, I'll start to change. And then by the time it gets to the terminator, right around where it turns to shadow, you get super rapid change. It goes very, very, very rapidly into shadow, and then it's in the shadow groupings. So what you're doing here is you have like a very even distribution, and it's not behaving the way that light actually works. So things are kind of stepping down like too gradually. You don't have enough contrast. And then also you are playing with fire here. Like you're maybe technically right by like 1%, but things aren't precise enough for a brain to read that there's like 1% difference in the lights here. Like you do need to kind of push the contrast on these areas. Right. So your light areas, they're going to stay very light, especially on a white plaster cast. They're going to stay very light. And it's not until an angle changes about 45 degrees away from the light source that we start to see actually like significant noticeable change in value. So you get extremely subtle changes within about 5 or 10% of the original value within the first like 30, 40 degrees of an angle tilting, which you can look up You can look up exactly that online if you want to like see the physics of it. So things that are dark stay dark, and things that are light stay light. Right? Light is nice and light until it isn't. Right? So like the reflected lights are all going to be more subtle. The bright lights are all going to be more light. And your halftones are all going to be darker. So your value scale isn't going to be this, actually. Your value scale is going to be right, 90. This one pretty good at like 87. This one maybe like 75. Right? These are your lights. And then you'll have like, you know, a transition color or a transition value, which is kind of right at that terminator line. Right? And then you'll have, you know, your shadow, which you know, you can make whatever value you want, and your reflected light. Right? So much more kind of sticky, right? These are all of your lights, 4, and then like 2 for your shadows, right? Or you can do it, you can have 3 for 3 if you want. But generally there's less information to capture in the shadows. And so we want to focus our lens on either the light or the shadow. If you think about like a camera lens, normally you're not exposing for both the lights and the shadows at once. You either expose for a lot of details in the lights, and then the shadows kind of all group together. You know, take your camera app out and like slide the exposure around and focus on like a light bulb, and then focus on like something dark. And you'll see when you focus on like something like a light bulb, your camera will close the aperture so that it takes in less light, and it focuses on the light bulb and gets as much information out of that as possible. But when it does that, what's going to happen is all the shadow information is going to group together, because now you're stealing all that information that was in the shadows and you're giving it to the light area. And likewise, if you want to focus on a shadow, you need to compress your lights down. You know, you basically only have so much budget within your value scheme. And if you want, and you can make creative decisions and choices about that if you like, that's totally fine. But you know, if I make everything darker, you know, all the shadows start to compress together, and all the lights kind of scale together in an even group. Likewise, if I want to make everything brighter, we start to lose that information in the lights, right? And now we have all this extra value range inside of all the shadows that we could render. But we can't render all of this detail inside of the lights and all this detail inside of the shadows at the same time, because they're competing with each other, right? If we see that level of detail inside of the shadows, we don't see them in the lights. And if you try to give yourself both at once, it becomes a mess, right? It becomes like an HDR photo. It looks really bad. So that you have kind of these groupings that are perfectly equal with each other, and they're fighting for space. You know, especially with like your sort of reflected lights in here. And they kind of need to all get pushed together. Also, if you see black, just use black. Don't be scared of black. Actually, I wonder if I can... do a threshold on here. Take the shadows down a little bit. Push the lights up a little bit. Take the halftones down just a bit. Bring the halftones here. We actually don't need to take so much information out of the shadows. All right, we get a little bit of a stronger read. We don't need to take, you know, much. I think it's a lot clearer. You have a lot of stuff that's not quite fighting with everything else as much. But there's also like a lot more that you can do, of course, like within the modeling. Just remember that these sort of groups, they need they're not evenly spaced out. So don't just grab like a value scale and just you know, chop it in half and give half to each, half to each. You know, really, I would recommend for someone like you, who probably is more interested in, like, just from the way that you draw and the way you're splitting up values and stuff, you might be more interested in like game art and like rendering and digital art and stuff like that. Because this is the way that a lot of people do digital art, learn to render. You know, I would do studies where you really try to match the value exactly as close as you can just by eye, you know, not by color picking or anything. You really do a study and you're like, okay, you know, how bright is this tone here? I can't see it. It's not in my color picker. You know, I think that, you know, compared to the white of the paper here, this is 100, you know, this is probably, this whole grouping of light, you know, it's probably going to be around 7 out of 10, if not even slightly darker. I'd say it's probably like 65 out of 100 compared to the white, which is, you know, 100 out of 10. And the darkest shadows, they're probably pretty close to black. I would, you know, probably make them black in my drawing, but you know, this stuff, I'd say is close enough to black. It's probably like actually like 5 or 6 out of 10. You know, but I'm going to say that, you know, the brightest point on this drawing, on this original reference, is probably a 75 out of, probably, say it's like 68 out of 100. 73. And you want to be, you know, kind of putting down those big groups, really making those sort of decisions, trying to match stuff as accurately as possible, and notice the rate that these values kind of drop off as you move around the corner, right? You know, as, you know, if this is 73 or 70 or so, you know, what is this now? Like, I'm not looking at the color picker. There we go. You know, this is probably, it's much closer to dark, but it's still, we know that light, you know, likes to stay sticky. It likes to stay closer to its lights. It doesn't fall off super quick until we're like right at the edge of that transition. So this is probably 45 or 43. Right. Yeah. 33, 39, 43. Yeah, like all this right here is like low 40s, right? So you really want, I think, would benefit a lot from doing some studies where you like try to be really, really accurate about exactly what you see. I haven't looked at chat in a minute. Where did I put my? Oh, I put my water all the way back here at the beginning. How long have we been going, chat? 2 hours? Okay, we're making it. I never do portraits the same size as my reference. Like, it's better proportional practice to change the scale slightly. Okay, everybody. So that's really what I see with a lot of you in this group. It's a lot of like little construction and angle stuff, like big, you know, checking big proportions. But a lot of you guys, the construction's like a little bit better, but it's just not super accurate to like the light that we're seeing, right? So, you know, I would try like kind of construction and accuracy stuff, probably first group ideas really. For you, it's a lot of the same stuff as like the details inside of the shadows. You're kind of taking up too much information inside of your shadows and this type of stuff, like a little bit too stylized with how the shadows work, you know, putting this dark core and then this mid-tone. You know, really try to look at stuff and observe actually how it works in real life and try to get those values very close, you know, and within their groups, and to not overlap and to not, you know, dig detail into every single part, but instead, you know, learn how to group the ideas. Kind of similar stuff with all of these, you know, just kind of accuracy, construction. This is nice. Actually, the accuracy probably, I think like the hair shape needs to be bigger and stuff, but the modeling looks decent and the separation, but there's no reason to work within this small value range, right? You know, again, really try to paint what you see. You know, to get, this is a time where you're not really trying to like stylize the, for a lot of you at least, this is good practice and really trying to observe values as they are and how things group together and how light changes. Your halftone, Lucia, I think you're the last person. Your halftone should be darker, your light should be lighter, basically. You know, because the lights stick together. There's a lot of change right around the terminator, right? Super fast drop off. And then your shadows. And there should be less information inside of your shadows if you want more information in your lights. Your lights can all be super bright, you know, and have very little information in them. And you can have all sorts of values inside of the shadows, but you can't have both. Yeah. Okay. Cool. You know, big groups of shapes. You know, I wouldn't kind of yeah, big groupings of shapes. Like use a paper stump. Like a lot of you guys, like I think it's something I'm gonna say with some of you below, where like a lot of you guys are really good down here at like separating the lights and shadows, but then like it's clear you just maybe don't know what to do next, right? So there's, you know, some accuracy and proportion stuff that you could take a step back from, you know, and correct and kind of dig into a little further. You know, I would also really try to group together the lights and shadows on the hair, especially, you know, never try to like attack stuff by like digging a ton of lines into it. I know those lines are there, but they're not really there. You want to kind of build out the masses. But then also, you know, put in your shadows and start to drag out your shadows where there are halftones. You know, use a paper stump, right? Or your finger or paper towel. You should use a paper stump though. It's the best tool for the job. Limited value or unlimited values for studying, just paint what you see, you know, learn from what's in front of you. Don't, like, there are conceptions, there are ideas or strategies that we use, but we want to use them to enable us to learn things, right? You don't want to use them or to like, people are just they're so into their like little Riley rhythm drawing methods and stuff like that they like they're not even like seeing the reference that's in front of them, right? Like the tools are only as good as the result they make. You know, they're not really like supposed to be beautiful tools, right? So yeah, use the values that you see. Now you know, there are reasons why that I just explained, that you don't want to put a million different values into the lights and a million different values into the shadows, because that's not the way that nature works, right? So, you know, if you're saying unlimited values and then you're putting in 400 different values through the drawing and you're trying to put information in different areas, that's not using unlimited values. You're just not understanding what you see. So, you know, you can describe nature beautifully and perfectly, you know, whatever perfect means, with only 5 values or only 4 values, right? But I wouldn't call it using a limited value or using a limited palette or whatever. You're just doing, you know, what you see, right? It's too many names, too many systems and schemes and stuff. Yeah. Okay. I kind of want to move on to the next category. It's a lot of light information. That I think you can all get something out of. You know, same with the hair stuff. You know, this is pretty solid, kind of some, yeah, this is pretty solid. I like the charcoal and stump technique, it looks like. This is interesting to me, just real quick. Right, like it's you know, not too far off, like proportionally, but there's another set of kind of like masses or forms that you can look for inside of here, right? So like, we know that the eyes are like eyeballs. You can only upload images for this critique from the current challenge. The current challenge ended, you know, with this stream. There's a new one posted tomorrow. You can join the Discord and, you know, look at the challenge announcements channel tomorrow morning, and you can do the challenge, and I will give critique on the challenge at the end of the challenge. Right, like the eyeballs are balls, right? And you have a light source that's coming from like this, probably. It looks like the light's kind of above and coming down and hitting stuff, you know, mostly from above. And it looks like stuff, you know, kind of as it rounds around to the left side is getting darker. So the light source probably coming like this. So, you know, you kind of have like a lot of the big information. One is that same thing I just said to everybody else, like, is this value here on your page as dark as it is in the reference? No, like you really can pack a lot more material onto your drawing here. Like push the value down, push more charcoal on the page, and then drag it out with your paper stump a little bit more and really kind of pack that in. And when you have darker halftones, right? When you have darker halftones, now you have more, you know, when you have darker shadows and darker halftones, you got more range to work in, more ability to make contrast in your lights, right? This whole left side of the face is, you know, this is the whole left plane, the whole left side of the face. If we look at like a planar head, and we got light that's kind of coming and getting darker as it wraps around. So everything on the left planes of the face is going to be a little bit darker, right? Same with the nose, right? Every left-facing plane of the nose gets darker. The nose at its most rudimentary form, you know, do the primitive form first. It's just like a box, right? Now, do we have an upwards-facing plane on the top of the nostril here? Yes. Is it as bright as the brighter sources of the face? It's not far off, but it's definitely not as bright, right? You know, it is kind of like nestled in here a little bit. So I want to make sure that it fits within the range of values that it's within. You know, and I want to keep asking myself, like, is this the value that I'm seeing, or does it need to be pushed down further, or does it need to be lightened up? Because you kind of did. The reason why I pulled this to the side is because you did a good job. You did lay out everything. You know, there's proportional stuff, construction stuff. Of course, you're going to keep working on that. You're going to keep improving that. But it's easy at this point, and this is why I'm not going to like rail everyone on their accuracy. Like you kind of do, if you want to get better accuracy, have to improve other stuff too. You have to improve your understanding of values. And so like, and also our understanding of forms and how forms fit and wedge and interlock into each other and construct stuff, right? So like we have the face, you know, the eye, and the eye is a ball, and the left side of the eye is going to get darker because everything that's going dark, or, you know, that's wrapping around the left side of the face is getting dark, and we can carve a light plane into it, right? In order to do that. To mark out the waterline, I mean. I'm gonna get some grocery store sushi tonight, man. It's gonna be fire. They make some pretty good salmon rolls at my nondescript North American bunker location grocery store. You know, and keep, you know, checking, like, is this edge the same as this edge? You know, is this level of brightness right relative to the darks over here? Is this little spot of light here the right value? You can keep pushing. You can, if you keep comparing the values. You got to compare all the time. Everything. Art is just so much about comparison. Back and forth. That's what develops the way the head is leaning is completely off. The way your brain is leaning is completely off. The point isn't just to talk about the exact accuracy things about everyone. The point is to understand the principles so that they can get better at accuracy with time, because you can't just get good at accuracy every single time you sit down and do a drawing. It's just sometimes you roll a 1, but there's more things to improve, and then improving those things makes you better at drawing and getting more accurate things. Thank you for coming to the Jake Don't Draw live stream Super Show experience, everybody. Cool, I think we're done with the middle category. Same shit, exactly. Same shit, exactly. Potluckins, you'll be mad if I skip you, which means I probably should skip you just to send a message, right? Yeah, it looks pretty good. I just want to see kind of like more specific planes, right? Like, I just want to see harder edges, which is what I tell you every single fucking time. So maybe I should have skipped you, right? Like, I do want to see like more specific, like intentional plane changes instead of like just everything being smoothed out. You know, and then you can kind of just hit like the corner of your plane change, you know, and I really doubt that, like, you know, the inside of the eye socket, which is like a pretty planar structure, is so soft. It is pretty soft on this side. You know, and also like the eye too is going to be getting hit by that, right? You have like a different, and the side of the eye socket probably is going to get a little bit darker. Yeah, it's just like a slightly more like specific point that I want you to move into. The general accuracy is quite good. Like this sort of like airbrushing like hurts my soul. You you know, I'd like to see you do studies where you like really do just, you know, try like starting out like just blacking like your shadow in like this, you know, maybe like use a few different like texture brushes and stuff and try to work from the abstraction a bit just to like help you loosen up on your process a bit. Yeah, overall it's pretty good. Just needs more time in the oven. Maybe draw some planar heads too. I think you'd benefit from drawing some planar heads. Developing an avocado allergy is like probably just GG. I'd probably just GG out. Not because I eat avocados all the time, but just because there's nothing that like hits like an avocado. You know what I mean? Ilya Repin. Ilya Repin is my profile picture on YouTube, yeah. Same shit, different day. Okay, we're getting down to the next tier. It's not gonna be a 5-hour stream, guys. I don't have it. You know, I made my points. These guys all have pretty darn good construction, pretty darn good proportions and accuracy. I remember Jacob, you said something about accuracy, and you know, techniques for finding accuracy. One is just you are getting better at it. It's just that accuracy is like such a slog and a super slow skill to build. It takes a lot of time, a lot of focus. It is about approaching things too, kind of, again, why I crash out on people, because it's just not about like getting all the angles right and like guessing and checking like everything a million times. It's like that's the beginner's version of accuracy, right? Like a more sophisticated, advanced version of accuracy, I think, like is thinking about kind of forms and constructions and shapes and, you know, characteristic traits like all at the same time, and like trying to use those all organically as tools to your advantage to, you know, identify the types of things that that are needed for the specific drawing to be accurate, right? And so, you know, I there are, especially, you know, on like David or whatever, right? Like a beginner, like I am gonna tell to like, you know, mark the top and bottom exactly and find the big envelope and work your construction into it and set your center lines and stuff like. But you know, for someone who's like a little bit more advanced, like, you know, where you're at, like you do really want to like remember kind of like these big shape ideas of David, like these swinging arching brows, like the general ideas of the proportions and the shape language. And you know, it's how like even, you know, a caricature of someone looks accurate even though there's not a single correct angle on it, right? Because like there's different meanings of the word accuracy, and if you nail the shape language of everything really, really well, then you get accuracy even if the angles aren't all matching correct, or even if all the values aren't right. And you can approach it in a lot of different ways, through shape, through value, through kind of like, you know, interesting like what I'm describing here when I'm looking at like the swooping and connection between different points, like kind of like rhythmic ideas that I'm really interested in. There's a lot of different ways to get accuracy, and I think the best way to improve is to try out different ways and to use different techniques and approaches, and also to always keep in mind how that actually pushes you to how you can use those ideas to work in a way that is general to specific, right? Use those ideas, like, you know, when I'm on heavy paint, you know, go do some heavy paint portraits. Why not? When I'm on heavy paint, like I don't get to do a nice line accurate drawing, so like I have to use this really clunky brush to like, or when I'm doing a 30 brushstroke challenge, right? Like I have to just say like, okay, you know, like I'm putting this down. This is or maybe I'll do it for David here. Like I'm putting this down. That's brushstroke number 1. This is 30 brush, you know, let's see if I can make this masterwork in only 30 brushstrokes. This one's going to be a huge challenge, guys. I really don't know if I'm going to do this one. Michelangelo was such a great sculptor. And, you know, here's number 2. I really want to start carving out the side plane of that face. Like, you know, it's not like some sort of script or whatever, but like, I know that whatever brushes that you have, you know, I could do it with the freaking leaf brushes if I want. Like, there has to be a front of the face that gets light. There has to be a side of the face that gets dark. And, you know, I'm not giving you very actionable things here, so I can understand there's probably like a bit that's like, okay, but what exactly do I need? But it is like an organic arrangement of these tools, and just something that takes many years of practice to really, really get good at seeing and improving. So you actually do have a really nice accuracy here. There's not really much that I would improve on the accuracy. I'd also say to be nice to yourself, because you can always roll a 1, and you will roll a lot more 1s, and you have a lot more 1s in your future, and you always will, So where we have this light source that's definitely coming from like the top left, I do just want to see like a little bit more separation between the top planes of things and the side planes and stuff. Especially like where we have the brow bone in here, the frontal bone of the forehead. The frontal bone of the forehead, you have like your glabella area here. Right, and then you have your brow, and the way that this bone comes down is it comes down and it like reaches out like this. Right. This line kind of goes to your temple, actually. Right, and then you have that central plate here. I think this is the frontal lobe. And you kind of have like these rhythms that go like this. Right, you have these little fosses here, which are areas for nerves to run through. You would never see those on the actual face. Just I'm thinking of a skull and recalling everything that I know. And this section kind of comes down and it connects in to this bottom piece, and this bottom piece is the zygomatic bone, right? This is the cheekbone. It kind of has this top plane, and it wraps around and connects in up here, right? And I do want to see a little bit more of that on yours, where we're really, really acknowledging, like, okay, the upwards facing planes, like, they do get that light. Like, we do see... I understand that if I took a color sample of this, it's not going to be pure white, but that is kind of a decision you make in your drawing. We still have upwards facing planes here, right? On top of that nasolabial fold, I think it's called. Right, likewise here. A little bit more in here. And then in order to make room for that, likewise, right, we do want to just push our halftones down a little bit more. You got to be careful, because you begin to like age people a lot if you're not careful. Get the specular along the side of the nose, but I would just brighten up the nose a little bit more, just to create some contrast. Likewise here you have like a little area where you can kind of dig in here, hit that top plane of the nostril. And I'm going to pull this transition out just slightly more to round that nose. Same with the front of the nose here. Carve in a bit more. It's going to be very subtle stuff. And then also I do want to see, you can put in a pretty strong couple hatch marks in here, right? I wouldn't put that there. Right. Same in here. Stuff looks pretty good. I would, try to make this line under here continuous, because it is a nice continuous shadow. So it is like kind of always the same advice that I give to everybody, but it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller scale. And then I talk to someone like, Devin Corwin or something, looks at some of my drawings, and he's like, yeah, Jake, you need to like think about things on like a larger scale and make sure the value groups are set in place better, and like understand like how the lighting works. And I'm like, oh damn, it's just value groups and stuff all the way down, isn't it? And that's something I said to Devin while talking to him, like, accuracy is like, this was a while back. Like I used to think like accuracy is just chasing down like all the angles as much as possible, because it just becomes maddening, and it's like not fun too to do it. It's really boring. It becomes really maddening. It's not fun to do it. And really what I've started to realize more is that like thinking about like kind of the big caricature, the big shape ideas, like is this guy's forehead squared off? Does he have like really sharp angular lines? Do these lines kind of flow and wick into each other more like David's eyebrows? Like with this guy, you know, you have this really hard, sharp line that comes down, and then you do kind of step out a little bit and get like kind of this mid-tone here. And then you do fold in very sharply here. And then you have right in here, kind of pulls out, and what are these angles and how do they flow into each other? You know, thinking about all of this stuff, and you can do it on the same level in the hair, it really does lead, you know, especially early, if you think about it early on, it really does lead to a higher degree of accuracy than if you just like try to like sit down and just get all the angles right and measure a million times. That type of stuff, like it just is stuff that we do to like teach people to like learn how to measure, but if you do it too much, you go insane. And it's just not fun. That's why like I don't like a lot of these Atelier curriculums. Because it's literally like 90% of what some of these schools do. It's just like more and more measuring, and it's such a slog, and it's so boring, and it takes 200 hours to do a cast. Which I know you're at no risk of. Yeah, very good stuff. You have tips besides practice for getting right values when using pencil. I tend to have the value of the shading be inconsistent across the same shade. I use a paper stump, use a paper stump, use a paper stump, use a paper stump, use a paper stump. Use a paper stump and a 6B, 8B pencil. You don't need to swap between like a million different pencil shades and you know, trying to get it right with the tip. Just use the tools that are made to smooth stuff, you know. For you, I would be very careful with a lot of the interior shadow stuff that I was giving advice to on you know, the reflected light stuff. I think that because you're in pencil, because you're working smaller like this, you just don't have a lot of value range. And so the difference between your lights and your darks is very small. Just, you know, if I were to actually put, you know, black here and white here, like the difference between your lights and your darks is actually like a very tiny portion of the value range because you're working with the tools that you are. And so that means that everything has to be way clearer than you don't really have any sort of room unless you want to work on this for 100 hours and like really have a lot of nuance in it. You don't have a lot of room to make small value differentiations because those percentages, if you're using the whole value scale, maybe you can make differentiations, you know, moving 10 points on the value scale out of 100. But with you, since you're in this tiny little compressed area, your difference in your shadows has to be like within 1% of each other, right? And so there's a lot of these details, I think, that just become a bit too strong and could be grouped together, like these reflected lights in here. That you would have a much better read if you could group them together and push them down, and that would open up more value range and more value room in your halftones to model on the face, because we're seeing pretty much just a flat tone over all the lights of the face. And that's the same thing I see with a bunch of you, like this one, kind of this one. Krista, yeah, same thing applies to Krista too. Yeah. So for these four, which is funny that they all did the same one, just coincidentally, you know, if you group your shadows together a little bit more, you will open up more room for darker stuff in your halftones. And I think the halftones are really, you know, those transitionary tones around the edge of the shadow, and just the different values in the lights are the most important things, right? That's what Sargent said. You know, all the importance is within the halftones. I don't remember the exact quote, but you know, that's really where all the modeling is. You get the big light and dark read, that's fine, but that's really a big describer of form. You're doing it better here. You know, and also I just want to say very clearly, if you haven't watched the other crits, well, you should. But the reason for that is because I think these reflected lights are just taking up all of your visual information budget in the head. This looks nice. It looks like one of those, you know, Korean drawings that you see on Instagram. I don't know who that person is, Giannis. What does more time in the oven mean? I just mean work on it longer. Sorry. Okay. The Primrose, did you put it in the crit channel? Somebody said I forgot theirs. The Primrose Worm. Primrose the Worm. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, I did miss it. Oh, no. I normally stop taking submissions for these about, like, I guess I should put a hard deadline because you guys are... I'm not saying anything about your neurotypicality or your neurodivergence, but you guys really benefit from very specific hard rules on everything that are very clearly outlined. And so sometimes I don't perfectly outline something, and I get a lot of people who need the exact rule. But I normally put the board together, like, you know, an hour or two before the stream, so I just had already put all these images on there. But you would be in the first category, my friend. Yeah, well, you know, the values are probably right in these areas. I think a lot of this, you know, just in general, looks nice. And to me, I'd probably have a little bit more to say if, you know, I was able to see the process, which obviously I can't because it's a traditional drawing. I think you're technically okay. I think with these, the values are, I think, within their groups properly. I would kind of push them together a little bit more, but it's fine. I would try to make, you know, a slightly clearer differentiation between, you know, the planes of the face. If you haven't studied, you know, the planes of the face very much, I think it would be important, you know, some skull drawing and stuff, where, you know, we do have this, what I was talking about with Jacob, we do have like this frontal lobe of the forehead here it protrudes upwards here. This is like a big mass here. It steps down on either side, and then we have the sides of the brow bone. And you can see this halftone plane change right in here. And we don't see that quite as much on yours. And when I do that, and when I push in on yours, I do feel like it does bring out that maybe the forehead's like a little bit too long. So sometimes kind of locking in our halftones like that does help. And really, when I put that value down, it becomes reasonably clear that, like, you know, the whole left plane of the forehead that's tilting away from the light source is within that darker group. Whereas in yours, it is slightly darker, but I think it's a little bit too, you know, timid and indescript. So it softens out just too much. You know, and you will have that same change over here, but it's just much more subtle. It's hard for me to... Over here, right? And that will kind of wrap around the whole way. Same with like kind of this whole glabella area. You can really feel kind of this shadow here. Right, like this is the inside of the eye socket here, and these shadows, like these halftones, they do spill out on a very subtle level, and they are spilling out and kind of wrapping around. Like if I was painting, I would want to be making my strokes that wrap around and come out like this and kind of spill out and in. And I do want to see like that same stuff. You know, I think that's just like kind of can be a problem with like, you know, drawing on the point very finely with your graphite, is you kind of sometimes will fall into the habit of like shading everything very smoothly. But I do, you know, that's why I like the paper stump a lot. It would be really nice to see some of those tones kind of pulling outwards from those shadows and then also being laced across and over the top in order to create, you know, the slight halftone variations that go over the glabella here. And now it feels like we have like a lot more rounding within this area, right? And likewise the same in here. Like you have actually a pretty descript triangular shadow shape in here, which has been kind of like distilled out. But I don't want to distill that out. And you got to be careful not to lose kind of the character of these ideas. Right, and we know that the eyeball is a ball, so it's rounding. It's getting darker on one side slightly. So much easier to do this with paper stump, by the way. You know, and then also this isn't like a line of even thickness in the shadow, right? Like you do get this point where it comes out into that corner of the eye, and then it spills out a little wider. You get kind of this varying thickness here that gives it a lot more depth. And you will, again, this is a rounded surface, so the top in this top lighting gets light and the sides get a little bit darker. How often do you do this? The stream happens every 2 weeks. You can check the Discord for new challenge announcements. You can select the challenge role and you will get notifications for the streams. I don't spam you. Please don't mute that bot and mute the notifications and then ask when things are happening, because I never spam. Don't mute the announcements tab. I don't almost never spam. I'm very neglectful, if anything. All right, still kind of rounding around on that side, and there is like a little bit of halftone here where we're kind of pulling into the side plane of the face as we wrap around. It's a very similar tone to what's over here, right? That's the zygomatic bone coming on top, softening into these areas. So it's like I think everything here is like good and accurate, but you could improve like your knowledge of like, you know, the planes of the face, so the anatomy a little bit by, you know, drawing some skulls and stuff, and allowing yourself to kind of dig a little bit more structurally into these points so that you can, you know, pull the rhythms between areas and understand the flow. And, you know, I wouldn't be so focused on like really finely making sure everything is filled in flat. I think it takes time, and you can spend the time doing anything else. And it's, if you spend the time like working out kind of the form and the structure of the skull, you'd get better results, even if your technique was very messy. If you like to work this way, though, that's fine. Yeah. A little bit more form. You can see it. It does make it kind of feel a little bit more three-dimensional within the face. Good job. And that's kind of the same thing for all of these, right? Like, I think you guys have, maybe you got to be a little bit careful about your information in the shadows. But if you push down that information in the shadows, you give it more darkness, then you have more room within the halftones to work. You know, so don't be scared and like make all your halftones really subtle. You know, be bold around the transitions, but only around the transitions, right? You know, so I think you can kind of push a little bit more into here, like if you kind of push the stuff down a bit more, Krista. And it gives you a little bit more range to kind of maybe just say like, oh, the whole left side of the face is a bit darker, and, you know, we get these halftones in here, and this whole, you know, plane on the left side of the face is a little bit darker. Maybe lighten it up just a little bit. Right. How does this pull out? And how do I wrap this around with the stump? Yeah. You know, it's little stuff, but it makes a big difference. You know, I do think that we are probably getting a little bit disunified in some of these shadows. Same goes for you, same goes for you. Modeling halftones is the hardest part of drawing, guys, like, but it's the most important part. Like, at first you just learn to separate the lights and the shadows, and, you know, everything is good, right? But it doesn't cut it all the way, right? At some point you need to start digging into more structural information and learning how to handle the lights and shadows of the smaller changes within there. Basically the same advice I gave to everyone else for you, Michael, but would just kind of, but also the advice specifically that I gave to Jacob would just, and I give you this advice every time, right? We're just, you know, keeping your light areas like a little bit cleaner and, you know, maybe like focusing your contrast around specifically exactly where you need. So that you get a little bit more just like planar separation. And you know, likewise with you, is good, but the values and stuff all look really accurate. I would just kind of control your mark direction so that you don't have like so many of these kind of slightly dirty changes in value, right? Like you don't need to have 3 or 4 values here that like, you know, step up here, right? Like you probably have one general shadowy tone and then like it gets a little bit darker here because you're wrapping around that front plane of the forehead. Right. Because you're wrapping around that front plane of the forehead. And maybe you are kind of chasing down these little individual changes. It's very possible that you're chasing down all these little individual changes because you're, you know, not very comfortable with the structure of the face or the anatomy. Or, and when I say anatomy, I really don't think you need to know many like muscles or anything on the face. I really don't. But certainly the skeletal structure. Very important, kind of like the big landmarks. Yeah, be like a little bit clearer with some of these transitions. Right, because it's just like a little bit dirty, and it doesn't need to be. Like you don't need to use like 3 different values for every single thing you do, right? Next challenge, probably figure. Everything else is very good. I like the Labubu Studios in the background is cute. And I like the colors too. Like the color stuff on here is really good. Color stuff on here is very good. Same thing to Sarah too. I think I put her in here. I think yours is like a little bit nicer. Well, I'd say it's actually pretty much very, very similar to the last one. And this is the critique. Some of you guys, you show up every week. I tell you the same thing every time, every week. Which I like, by the way. Everyone has kind of different biases that they go in, but there's just areas where I think you get a little bit too caught up on like all the reflected lights and stuff, and it's just like if you know, you got like I do this every time, so it's funny. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you know, 8, 9, 10, you know, just to like you got like 10 values or colors just to like get this part right. It's really doesn't need to be that way. Like I like all the color stuff that you have, but things can just get unified together like a little bit more, you know. And you can have really as much hue variation as you want. I think this stuff is really dark under here. So if you want to have lots of stuff, like lots of information in the shadows, like go back to the intermediate area. If you want to have lots of, like the way that, if you want something to look realistic, if you want to have lots of information in the shadows, you have to compress the information in the lights. You only have so much budget and you can either choose to spend it on the lights or the shadows. If you try to put too many transitions and values within both, it's not how real life works, so it doesn't look realistic. It starts to get very stylized and kind of flattens out a little bit. And you do a lot of things right. You know, the value choices are pretty solid. So like it still feels pretty 3D. But things just need to get like grouped together like a little bit closer. Cool, very good. Last section of people, you know, I have minimal crit for. Emily's been popping off lately. I've really liked your art, Emily. You've come, I can't really remember what your figures or portraits looked like a year ago, but I remember them not looking as good. And this one looks really good. I think you've improved a lot, and I think that's really cool. And you know, in general, like there's a nice wrapping feeling too. Like I really like that there's like this feeling of wrapping stuff. Like that's so good. That's really nice. That's what I like the most about this. There's probably just some areas too that I would really try to, and I don't know if this is like limited by resolution, where I really wouldn't be scared of I'm low opacity. Especially, you know, with cast shadows have really, really hard edges. So like after you can stump in the shadow, but like after you stump in the shadow, like just lay some hatch marks in, you know, zoom in some of those 19th century drawings too. We're going to post some new ones that Ramon took in Paris soon. Just waiting for the photos on those. So maybe when he gets back, maybe in like a week or two. But like this like sort of accenting really, really, really makes a lot of clarity. Also, like, make sure you have enough space for everything in here. It's up and around. You have your lid. Up and around. You know, this type of stuff, it's small, but it makes a big difference. Where's the light source coming from? Darker on the right side, yeah. But the general look of it feels really nice. It looks very 19th century. Definitely come in with your Conte and like really try to carve stuff out. You know, or like redo it after you stump. I feel like when I come into these areas, I just feel like there's not enough room in the eyes. This sculpture has like really big eyes. It's a really easy mistake to make. Like the eyes in actuality are probably a little bit bigger than this. But yeah, you're most of the way there on a lot of this stuff, which is nice. Yeah, same with the curls. Get in here like a little bit. Just on some of the like the darkest points, and it makes a big difference. He looks a little cross-eyed now. That's my fault. I'm not dealing with getting that layer back. I was trying to turn it on and off, but I can't do it. This looks pretty nice. I probably would bump you up one category. No offense. Just because I think that there's a little bit too much visual information within the groupings of the lights, right? Like we have things that are same stuff that I talked about with some of the people in this category. With the drawing, I think it was like over here, especially where I brought it over here and showed the value scales. Like go back and watch that if you skip to this point. There is just the lights are a little bit disunified. They're not sticking together quite enough. And you're using like a couple too many values and it starts to flatten out the form. So just remember that your light should stay, you know, nice and light until they are, you know, more than like 45, the plane is facing, you know, inclined like more than 45 degrees away from the light source. So, you know, this side plane over here. And the rate that the value changes, you know, goes towards the darkness, that happens very, very subtly and very, very quickly at the edge of the shadow. I learned like 95% from you. Let's freaking go. Keep at it. And do the design challenges too. do the creature design challenges if you want to get good. Even if you don't want to do stuff, even if you don't like game art. So just like a little bit more unity in the lights to help group stuff together. It just makes stuff look more realistic. We're getting there in the design challenges. And you actually, now that I look at it, it's the exact same crit I gave all of these. I think yours is like a little bit closer. But there's probably just. Like, I imagine the values are accurate. Oh, you're gray. You're gray. I know who you are. Yeah, I think that Gray spent a long time on this probably. I don't know. I think I saw them in VC for like a day or two. It's the same crit I did up here. This looks nice. Like I think all the values are probably very accurate. The likeness is very accurate. So, you know, it just becomes like a little bit more of like what you want out of the cast study. If your goal is to render every curl and get everything, you know, as accurate as possible, then that's nice. But there are areas where like I probably would look, you know, and if I was oil painting, I certainly would kind of try to group and simplify stuff together a little bit more. Just for the sake of like, you know, time efficiency and also kind of controlling like the focus of the image too. Just so that, you know, you have like maybe like a, this is not something that I think about when doing like kind of academic studies normally. Normally with a lot of academic work, you are just trying to render stuff. But, you know, as I get more into like design ideas, 6 to 7 hours that's not that bad. Leon Kennedy style. And just, you know, as you, let me I just unlocked myself so hard with that comment. I'm sorry. I just unlocked myself so hard. My voice is running out. I really just unlocked myself. That's 6-7's the funniest shit ever, man. Just up all night laughing at that. Brain aneurysm. I got unlocked so hard. Yeah, you know, there's when I start to think more about design and like building images and stuff, I start to imagine kind of like where I want the viewers a focal path to go through, or like their line of focus, and I try to render things like along that line of focus to the highest degree, because otherwise you kind of get to this point where you like overmodel. Maybe like overmodel is kind of a complicated subjective, but you render everything and you don't actually have like a single strong focal point, and kind of the values start to get used up a little bit too much on certain areas. So there are areas too, like, you know, even in here, like the value's probably right, but like I would probably just like, you know, show this stuff a little bit more just as like kind of planes, you know, other than like kind of specific areas that I want to like give a little bit more focus to. And when you do that, it ends up just really kind of help, you know, the overall like feeling and design of the image. I'm sure if I brought this next to the reference, I could like point out areas that are like specifically getting like a little bit too bright, but like, I don't know, it looks like reasonably accurate. I think it does help a lot, actually, especially with like the feeling in these areas, to remove a little bit of the detail. And then again, same shit about like modeling the forehead and like understanding like the planes of the face. I think you do have like a little bit more room to kind of push that stuff in here. Like once you pull the detail out of here, you have more budget to spend again, and like you can kind of spend that detail in these areas. You know, this whole like kind of receding plane, that type of stuff. That's the eye. Yeah, it helps, you know, make things feel a little bit more 3D, a little bit more sculptural, a little bit more carved. Also, you cuss? Thank you, thank you, dude. You helped me so much in art. Also, you cuss? Sometimes, man. Sometimes I'd be cussing. Sometimes I'd be cussing a little bit. Hey, just put the headphones on, all right? Don't let mom hear. It's a headphones on stream. At least when you aren't frame mugging the chat anymore with full screen job, actually. Yeah, I do sometimes frame mug. Sometimes you gotta frame mug, you know. I mean, I'm kind of, I think I lost all of my mugging aura when I drank from the straw like a hamster. I think I became too cute and rodent-like in everyone's eyes. This is really nice. I didn't expect to say this. I didn't really even expect to give you that much crit. I think like everything is like pretty generally fine, and the modeling in these areas is pretty nice. But I would say there's probably like basically the same crit that I gave this. Like a little bit too much visual information in some of the shadows where you could kind of group stuff together. And, you know, but the values are all pretty accurate. You know, I would try to like really control, you know, your edges in areas like this, especially like the edges and the shapes in areas like this specifically. Have like the right firmness without it getting like too soft, without kind of blending everything. And to have like, you know, those sharp transitions, you normally do get pretty sharp transitions in value around the brow area because you go from this like, you know, flat brow, you know, carving into the forehead. In general, though, it looks pretty nice. So I don't have too much crit for you. There's, you know, areas that you could push in here. I don't know how, you know, inefficient your process is. So it becomes, you know, with a lot of questions. It becomes a lot of questions about kind of process-oriented stuff, right? I think I did too much with the hair. Yeah, I think it's just a little bit too much, and it's just like it's a time management thing too, you know. Depends on like what your goals are in art, and you know, if you want to do like super slow paintings where you like, you know, finally render out delicate floral patterns, you know, and some like super, you know, specific like still life or super realistic still life or whatever, like, yeah, you know, over render the hell out of the hair. Like that's good practice for you, but you said you draw anime, so I kind of doubt that. There's probably like a bigger picture decision making that you can do that would appeal to you more. And that would help the decisions that you make when drawing too. When drawing, you know, even stylized anime stuff. Yeah, overall it's really good. Especially like where the lights are hitting too. Like these halftones are generally like so subtle when you're in like the areas where the lights are hitting the brightest on the top of the head. Like they're so subtle that they like pretty much blend together. It's small changes, but I actually do think that some of this stuff like helps a little bit, especially like the rounding of the side of the head over here. You know, getting like slightly darker folds in those areas of rapid change, kind of pushing down the reflected lights, bringing up the brighter lights. It does, I think, make a subtle difference. That is everything, I think. I think everyone did a really great job. Actually, these are all really solid, and you know, it's a nice kind of grouping of different ideas that I can talk about. I didn't honestly expect to touch on some of the things that I touched on today, and I always do find kind of different themes that I don't expect to find. You answered all my questions during the rest of the stream. That's how it should go. Everyone should be like you. People just skip to their spot and then they get mad that I skipped them. But mother freaker, you skipped me. We're not cussing anymore. Thank you everybody for the Jake No Draw live stream. Super Show Extravaganza Bonanza. Spectacular Super Show special. TikTok sent me this. Wait, I probably already said that. You guys saw me drink out of this like a hamster. This is a nice song. Sounds like dementia music before the dementia sets in.